Hello friend, if you're new, my name is Becky. Welcome to my kitchen. We are going to be spending a long time in the kitchen today looking back at the best of recipes from over the last year. I did this last year where Josh and I went through all of the dinner inspiration videos and where we made brand new recipes, new techniques and things like that. And we picked out the ones that we've remade, our favorites, just like the heavy hitters that were just oh so good. And we compiled those together so that if you want to see the best of recipes from this last year, you can find them in one place. In this video, you're going to find Instant Pot dinners, stovetop dinners, slow cooker dinners, oven dinners, all different kinds of dinners. There's going to be chicken, pork, beef, and it's just going to be all sorts of different types of dinner inspirations for you. I will link the written recipe where I found the recipe and the timestamp down in the description box if you are interested in making any of these dinners yourself. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the best of over the last year. Now the next recipe is the one that really, when I saw this, I thought I have to give this a try. It is going to be a street corn steak Crunchwrap Supreme. When I was in college, Crunchwrap Supremes homemade were one of my friends and I's go-to dinners. I used to go to their house after school all the time. And one of our go-to dinners was meatloaf and Crunchwrap Supremes. Now we did more of a traditional, we would make it homemade and we would do the traditional Crunchwrap Supreme with the ground beef and the sour cream and the tomatoes and the lettuce and the cheese. But this one is a completely different take on it and I think it's gonna be delicious. Now this recipe is probably going to be the most labor intensive. It's still super, super easy, but it has a couple different components that we have to make. So we basically started out with the easiest recipe and have been kind of working up towards this one, even though I think this one's gonna be really easy. I have 2 New York steaks here that I got from a local farmer. And what I'm gonna do is get these out of the package. And I'm gonna cut off the kind of excess fat bits that I don't really want to cook up in my steak. These have completely thawed. I took these out of the freezer a day and a half ago. It would be probably easier to cut these if they were still a little bit frozen. Cut these bits off. And then I'm gonna cut this steak as thin as I can get it. If you wanted to make the same recipe but substitute ground beef, you could absolutely do that. I happen to have quite a few steaks in my freezer because I purchase half a cow at a time. So we're gonna use these New York steaks. But I'm sure this would be good with ground beef as well. Okay, so now we have a really thinly beef. This is ready to go out there. I'm gonna cut this little piece off right here. I'm gonna take this corn and this beef out there and we're gonna go fry both of these up. This recipe does not call for tahini, but I was thinking this would be really good with this corn salsa or salad that we're gonna make. So I went ahead and grabbed that. Let's take our temperature of our griddle. I almost think I'm gonna need to turn it up. 160, or I don't know why I keep saying that, 360. I just turned it up a little bit. Now it says it's 575. It couldn't have heated up that quickly. Huh, okay, I think it's hot enough. I'm gonna put a little oil down. I actually didn't fill up my water thing because I didn't think we would need it for this. Ooh, that's a lot of oil. That was very easy. So let's go inside and put together our crunch wraps. We still have to turn our corn into our corn salsa, and we get to, I'm gonna put the salt and pepper away because I've seasoned everything really well. I don't wanna over season things. So we need to make this into a corn salsa. So I'm just gonna put this over here, and we're gonna add some mayo because we're basically making like a street corn salsa. I keep wanting to say salsa, but it's like salad, topping, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna wipe this up. But you can see how we got such a beautiful color on our corn. And if you don't like mayo, go ahead and add Greek yogurt to this or sour cream. To our corn, I'm gonna add just a little bit of Chipotle for flavor. I don't wanna add too much because I don't want it to be too spicy. I have some cilantro here. This is not the right knife to do this, but this is the clean knife I have. So I'm gonna go ahead and just chop up this cilantro pretty fine. I would highly recommend a chef's knife for this, not a bread knife. But sometimes you just gotta use what you have. We're gonna add all of that to there. I wanna squeeze the juice of probably half this lime. Yeah, we definitely need some brightness to this. And then we need to add some cheese. Now this is a new brand I have never tried before. I'm not sure how to open it. It's a local brand and it's made in Oregon. So when I saw this at the store, I thought I was gonna go ahead and give it a try. I don't know the brand that I normally buy. Normally I buy this at Winco, but I was at New Seasons. So I'm just gonna cut a little piece off and give this little piece a try. I love cheese. Very mild, very rich at the end, creamy. It's not as dry as the brand I normally buy. If you're wondering what these are graham crackers. I had a request this morning when I got up for crackers. We didn't have any crackers in our house. So this morning we spent some time as a family making homemade graham crackers, which was a lot of fun. So if you've never bought this kind of cheese before, it's kind of like a feta in that it crumbles and it's a fresh cheese and it's kind of salty like feta. It does not have as sharp of a flavor as feta does. And you just kind of crumble it with a fork. We're gonna get that in there. I don't want any huge chunks. This adds a nice saltiness to it. That's why I didn't want to add any more salt until I give it a try. Ooh, I just smelled that cilantro from hitting the heat of the corn. Yum. Okay, that's probably good. I may need to add a little more mayo. I'm not measuring anything, I'm just kind of going with what looks right, and then I'll taste and adjust as needed. But the recipe that I will link for you does have written measurements on everything. That is so sweet and delicious. I do think it needs a touch more lime. Wow, that alone, serve that up in a bowl with a bowl of chips, and it would be gone in no time. This would make a really good like football dip or summer dip. I'm sure it'd be really good cold too if you chilled this. Right now it's kind of warm. I am gonna make up one of these crunch wraps right now so we can, Josh and I can share one. I'm gonna bring this out to the garden so he can give this a try. But the nice thing is I obviously made way more than what we'll make one, so I can make up more later for when we definitely are gonna want another one of these because I'm sure they're gonna be delicious. I will let you know though if they are once they're cooked up. So here we've got a burrito-sized tortilla and a fajita-sized tortilla. And if you've never made a crunch wrap, you also need a tostada. And they're so easy to make. That one's broken. I'm gonna try to get one that's not broken. We have all of our components here. I have some sharp cheddar cheese. I thought would be good on this, and sour cream. This idea has gotten my creativity thinking of all the different variations of crunch wraps you could make. I had never really thought of different variations of crunch wraps until I saw this recipe. So we're gonna start with our steak, and of course, you could season that steak up however you want. If I had some taco seasoning, I would have put that on here when I fried it up, but I am out right now, so that's why I just used that Montreal steak. I'm gonna add a little bit of cheese as a glue. Now we're gonna add our corn. You know what I was gonna do? To make this a little bit creamier, I was gonna add just a bit of sour cream. Now we're gonna add our corn. We're gonna top that with a tortilla, then we're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna go take this out to the Blackstone. Ooh, a little dark. Perfect. So let's go ahead and cut this in half. That's what it looks like on the inside. First attempt, you can see I did not get it melty, but I'm still gonna go bring this to Josh and we're gonna go give this a taste test. I figured I could bring him a little snack out in the garden. Okay, so what this is a street corn taco crunch wrap supreme.
Nice.
Steak street corn taco.
Steak?
Yeah.
Wow.
Ready?
Yeah, it's good. Nice and crunchy.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a little bit of cracked corn kind of?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We love us some cracked corn.
There is such a good salty balance with the sweetness of the corn and the saltiness of the tostada in there with the crunch. The only thing I would change is next time I need to do lower and slower so the cheese melts. Because if you notice the cheese isn't totally melted, I think my griddle was too hot.
Oh, yeah. It's great though. Nice little snack. Little pick-me-up.
We are going to have slow cooker shredded beef salsa verde, and this could not be any easier. It's definitely a dump and go. I think this is really where the slow cooker shines, is low and slow beef and pork. I'm going to share with you a little bit later in this video a slow cooker pork recipe that is so good, and this one is so good. Now I am peeling 2 onions. One's really tiny and one's really large. I'm getting the root end off because I'm gonna just throw this whole onion in the slow cooker. This is just for pure flavor. We're not actually gonna eat the onion or this garlic. I also have another whole head of garlic here. I'm gonna go ahead and just cut the ends off, chop, like smash them and get them peeled, and then I'm gonna put them whole into the slow cooker. I'm not gonna worry about chopping them or anything. Now I totally ran out of all the garlic that I have pre-chopped in my freezer right now, so I am getting this fresh garlic out, but you could skip this step if you wanted to, if you have jarred garlic or if you have prepped garlic in your freezer, or if you want to use dried onions and dried garlic, go ahead and do that. But I happen to have this and I had a few minutes on this morning, so I went ahead and peeled an onion and a whole bunch of garlic. So I'm going to get my onions and garlic in my slow cooker, and then I have this piece of roast. I don't remember the cut of this, but you could use any type of roast you want. You could use a top round. I think this was a sirloin roast. My favorite is chuck roast, but this was from a half a cow that I had purchased 2 summers ago. So I wanted to get this used up because I am picking up a half a cow this week. And so I went ahead and I just diced that into big chunks, got that in the slow cooker, and now I'm going to go ahead and season this up. I have some smoked salt, and I thought this would be the perfect time to use it. I have not used it, and it is so delicious. So I sprinkle it with some smoked salt, and then I'm just going to add cumin, chipotle powder, coriander, salt, pepper, and those are going to be the spices on this. Now you could take the time to sear this beef in a skillet before you put it in the slow cooker. That would add a lot of delicious flavor, but I was not about to do that on this morning, so I just put my beef right into my slow cooker, and I seasoned the top of it. Oh, I did add quite a bit of black pepper as well. Now, the kind of the star of the show is not only the beef, but is also a jar of Salsa Verde. And this is some Salsa Verde I made last summer. I'm going to just pour this over the top. Use whatever your favorite Salsa Verde is. We're going to get this covered, and we're going to cook this on low and slow for about 8 to 10 hours, basically all day. I want this to get so tender I can just shred it. Now, I did happen to have some peppers in my refrigerator. This is totally optional. These are from the garden, and I thought that they would add some nice pepper flavor. We don't end up eating these peppers. I'm using them just for flavor. And then it's always good to add a little bit of citrus. You could use a lime. I happen to have lemons in my fridge, so I'm going to squeeze the juice of one whole lemon over the top of our beef, put the lid on, and we will see it in a little bit. Now, this was a very busy day. On this day, we go live and we make donuts together, and I did a bunch of harvesting in the garden. So I was harvesting, and I thought I had some other projects I needed to do to put some tomatoes up so that I could turn them into marinara sauce. So when I came in from the garden and I was already doing some other things, it was kind of midday, and I already had my cutting board out and my knife out, so I thought I would go ahead and get some pico de gallo made as well. So on this night, we are going to use this Salsa Verde beef as a burrito bowl topping. It's going to be like the main part of our burrito bowl. And I end up taking that meat throughout the rest of the week, and I turn it into a couple other things. We end up having beef tacos, we have quesadillas, and I use it kind of as a meal prep option for different lunches and a really quick dinner because I had it and I wanted to use it up. And the beauty of the garden right now is that it's producing these beautiful slicing tomatoes. And so I'm trying to enjoy as much fresh tomatoes as I can. The onion was from the garden, the cilantro was from the garden, tomatoes were from the garden. So I go ahead and I chop them all up. I wanted kind of a little bit of a fine pico. We are also able to eat this salsa for tonight's dinner, but the beauty is I was also able to enjoy this as kind of meal prep, and I am able to put this salsa on a bunch of other things, on my eggs in the morning, and then for the quesadillas and the other things. So this is just a very quick salsa. It's tomatoes, onions. I could have put a jalapeno in there, but I don't think I did. Cilantro, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and then the juice of lemons. I actually like the flavor of lemons better than limes, so I typically tend to not have limes in my house that often, but if you prefer limes, go ahead and use limes. And then I did find one more garlic puck, so I just threw that in there, and that, I guess, is my very, very last frozen garlic. So I'm going to have to do a big garlic processing day at some point here. So I seasoned up this pico. I'm going to pop this in the fridge, and now we can go ahead and check on our beef because it has been cooking for a very, very long time. So you can see the peppers are starting to get soft and the beef is not quite ready yet. So I just kind of tuck all the different pieces of meat in there. I tasted the broth because everything is cooked at this point, and I thought it could use a little bit of sweetness. So I put a couple tablespoons of honey in there, and the peppers that I had put in there from the garden were pretty hot. So it needed that little bit of balance of sweetness. So now I'm going to go ahead and get going on kind of like the final part of this dinner on this day. And this is just some rice in the Instant Pot. I like to toast my rice up in the Instant Pot with a little bit of butter. I have some salsa from last year's garden. I like to add that to my rice when I make burrito bowls because it just adds really, really good flavor. It has peppers and onions and garlic and all sorts of good stuff in there. And then I'm going to use this tomato juice from last year's garden to cook my rice with. So we're going to kind of have a tomato-based rice that is going to be delicious. I'm going to get the lid on this and I'm going to put it on the rice button, and we're going to let this cook. And here you can see our beef now after about, I think it cooked for about 10 hours. At one point I put it on low and I just let it kind of sit in the background while I had a busy day. And then when it was time for dinner, I took the beef out of the slow cooker and I let it rest a little bit. I don't like biting into any pieces of fat, so I let it kind of cool so that I can shred it and remove any pieces of fat. I did cut away the really big pieces when we prepped it earlier in the day, and then after I removed those pieces of fat, I put it back into the slow cooker. I shredded it up with 2 forks. I strained the broth in my fat separator. I got out the garlic, the onions, and the peppers, and the lemon peel, And once that kind of sat for a few minutes, I was able to put that delicious flavor back into the slow cooker and leave kind of the fatty bit on the top. And you can notice I didn't add any extra broth to this beef. I just let it cook with the moisture from the onions, its own broth it created, and the moisture from the salsa verde. And you could see it was plenty brothy to make a nice sauce for our dinner. So here's our dinner. We have our beef. These are all the components. I pulled out some sour cream and cheese and hot sauce. We have the rice. We have our pico and an easy dinner with enough leftovers that I was able to turn it into all different types of things throughout the rest of the week. And we just really ate on this and really enjoyed it. So here's what it looked like the first night as a burrito bowl. Super delicious and versatile. Okay, so let's make some orange chicken now. I don't fry things that often, so when I do, it kind of feels like a special treat, huh, Josh?
Definitely.
Yeah. But that was really easy. The nice thing about that recipe in particular is that it was already cooked, the filling. Last time I made a kind of egg roll, the filling wasn't cooked, and so they took forever to cook, and they were hard to make sure that you got the filling cooked and the outside crunchy and not over crunchy. For the orange chicken sauce, we are gonna make it on the stove first, and we're gonna make it out of some orange juice. And I am going to 1.5 recipes this because we are gonna use this as a dipping sauce for our, oops. Let me get this cleaned up real quick. We're gonna use it as a dipping sauce for our egg rolls. Got a little excited with that orange juice. I always find if you can clean up spills and messes before they dry, it makes cleaning so much easier. Don't always do it, but when I do, I thank myself. This orange juice is very full. This is rice wine vinegar. We're gonna add ginger, garlic, soy sauce. The recipe calls for red chili flakes, which might be too spicy for my family, so I'm gonna use these Korean red chili flakes, which are delicious. It's called gochugaru, if I'm saying that correctly. And it gives you a delicious chili flavor without too much heat. So I'm gonna add that instead. I can link that for you if you're interested in it. It's delicious. And then we're gonna add the sugar. So this is gonna be pretty sweet. I might just put a little bit of orange juice in there to get the rest of that sugar out of there. And then this needs to boil for at least 4 minutes. While I'm waiting for that to boil, I'm gonna make my cornstarch slurry. I have water in, this is the same just measuring cup I've been using. And now I'm gonna add some cornstarch, mix that together. I'm gonna put some orange zest in here. This is gonna give a lot of orange flavor without any more liquid. So this is looking silky and beautiful. I'm gonna give this a taste test because we can adjust the seasonings if we need to. We could add salt, more garlic, more ginger, more pepper flakes if we want to. So I'm excited to try this. It smells fantastic in here. It has this beautiful, like sweet, gingery, garlicky smell in here. Wow. That is good. Even though we added 1 whole cup of sugar to that, it does not feel too sweet. Feels like the garlic's on point, Feels like it doesn't need any. Let me add a little bit of salt. I didn't add any salt to it because we added soy sauce, but I think it could use a pinch, balance out the sweetness. I'm gonna turn this off now, especially before it bubbles over. I don't always cook with fresh ginger and garlic. Sometimes I use powdered, and that's fine. But I think the fresh ginger and garlic in this kind of brings it up a level. Wow. That is fantastic. These are huge chicken breasts. So I'm gonna take a second and cut off any fatty bits and any pieces I don't want in our final pieces of chicken. So now we are going to dust this chicken with flour and cornstarch. And I'm going to heat that oil back up that we just used. We're gonna do equal parts flour to cornstarch. And instead of mixing this in a baking dish like it says and dipping each individual one, we're just going to mix it in this bowl all together. I didn't want to do each individual piece at one time. I figured this would be faster. And I'm going to heat this oil back up. It should already be pretty warm still. So we're at about 100 degrees here. So we are at 370 basically. So I'm gonna start putting some chicken in here. And how am I gonna do this? Let's see. This is much easier having all of the chicken floured and cornstarched. And then all I have to do is dip it in the egg mixture, instead of having to dip it in the cornstarch mixture, then the egg mixture. I used to make something very similar to this when Josh and I first got married. I found this sweet and sour recipe on Pinterest, and I haven't made it in years. I've made it at this house, so it's probably been 2 years. I know we were building the garden out when I made it, and basically you prep the chicken the same way, but the sauce is a sweet and sour sauce, and it's ketchup, vinegar, sugar, sriracha, I think I added, wasn't in the original recipe, and you just cook that. You did not add a thickener, and then you would take your par-cooked chicken, because you didn't have to cook them all the way, you would put them in a 9x13 baking dish, pour your sauce all over the top, throw it in the oven, and cook it until the chicken was cooked through, and it was so good. And now I need to make that soon because I haven't made that recipe in a long time. I have to see if I can find it. If I can find it, I will link it down below for you, because the reason that made me think of that is I have to make sure this chicken is fully cooked before I take it out, each piece, versus the other recipe, you finish the chicken in the oven, so you don't have to worry about cooking it fully on the stovetop in the frying pan. All you're looking to do is crisp up the chicken. Maybe I'll do that, because it always lent to the most tender chicken, and it was just so good, and I loved the technique. So I might call an audible, and I'm gonna preheat my oven, and I'm gonna do that same thing. And that way When this chicken is done, our Mongolian beef will be done at the same time, probably. I don't want 500 degrees. I'm gonna do 350. So now that we have our par-cooked chicken, because I did not go through the effort of taking the temperature of each piece of this chicken, we're gonna head over here, and this is where I am deviating from this recipe. This recipe says cook this chicken till it's fully cooked, toss it in with your sauce, and it's done. But what I wanna do is go ahead and get this chicken into this baking dish. And I'm going to finish this chicken like that other recipe that I really, really like, because it just lends to a super tender chicken. And I'm not worried about this being super crispy. And if I was just making this plus the green beans, this would be the perfect time to prep this, get this in the oven, make the green beans, then the chicken would be hot, the green beans would be hot, everything would be hot at the same time. But I'm making a few more recipes today. Oh, it smells so good. Into the oven this goes. I just took the temperature of this chicken and it is done. So I'm gonna get some green onions on here. Okay, you wanna try the orange chicken now?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the orange chicken. Now it's not gonna be super crispy because I baked it in the oven, so it's gonna be the texture. Remember that sweet and sour chicken I used to make? Mm-hmm. I cooked it like that.
Nice.
Okay, here we go. It's good?
Orangey.
That's good.
Very good. Much more orange flavor than what you get at like Panda Express or something.
Super tender. I really like that technique of finishing it in the oven.
Very good.
Okay, so I've got one more dish to make and then you can plate up your whole dinner, okay?
I'm so excited.
These flavors counterbalanced with rice is gonna be so good.
It's going to be amazing.
'Cause right
all
now-
the juices on the rice.
Yeah, because it's very, very rich right now. So the rice will just balance that out. We used to go for special occasions to P.F. Chang's when I was a kid, and their Mongolian beef was my absolute favorite. We do not even have a P.F. Chang's around us anymore. And I tried making it when I was, I think, in high school or college, so probably 15, 20 years ago, and I haven't tried making it since, so I'm excited to see how this is gonna turn out. Now, the recipe that I found calls for 1.5 pounds of your choice of steak. This is New York steak. I buy half a cow at a time, and this is what I had in my freezer, and it calls for 1.5 pounds, super thinly sliced. I pulled out 2 packages, which had 2 steaks in it, so I have 4 steaks here total. And so I pulled out my bowl, and I'm gonna weigh this just so I know how much meat I have here, to know if I have more than the recipe calls for or less, so I can adjust if I need to make more sauce or less sauce than the recipe calls for. I felt like 4 steaks probably seemed like 1.5 pounds, but I wasn't exactly sure. And I am cutting off any big pieces of fat so that we have mostly, this is well marbled, but more on the lean protein side than these kind of bigger pieces of fat. And I can give those, or some of that, to my chickens, and they will be super happy to have it. Now I didn't want to weigh this until after I cut off most of that fat. This is 1 pound, 8 ounces. So basically exactly 1.5 pounds. So that's perfect. Now we are gonna make our marinade to go onto this beef. And it's pretty simple ingredients, and it calls for something that I have seen in many recipes to tenderize beef, but I have never tried it myself. And that's to put, not baking powder, but baking soda. And that's supposed to be a good tenderizer, but I've never actually tried it, even though I've heard about it for probably 10 years now, that you can do this. So we're gonna put 1 teaspoon of baking soda in here, 1 egg white, I broke that yolk, but I'm sure it's okay if a little bit of yolk gets in there. 3 tablespoons of this cooking wine. And 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch. So now I'm gonna mix this all together. That cooking wine is super strong smelling. At this point, we're not supposed to add any salt or pepper. While I'm working on this, I'm gonna mix up the sauce components. We need to add oyster sauce. And I'm gonna eyeball 2 tablespoons. I guess I could have measured because I have my 2 tablespoons right here. And then we need 2 tablespoons or 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. And we need 2 tablespoons of sugar. So this is our sauce. So I'm gonna put this beef in the fridge, and this can just sit out until we're ready for it. And we already have our green onions done as well. Into the fridge it goes. So now what we're gonna do is cook up this Mongolian beef. I am going to pan fry this. The recipe says fry or pan fry. And it's not super clear. Let's see if I can get this to turn back on. Sometimes this burner is a little finicky. I can't get that one to turn on, so we're gonna use this one. So we are going to not deep fry, but we're gonna put quite a bit of oil and do like a medium fry on it, I guess. Pan fry. And then we're gonna get most of this oil out after we get this beef cooked, but we need this obviously pretty hot. So here's our beef. And I don't think I wanna just dump these in here, so I think I'm gonna put kind of like 1 piece in at a time, is what I'm guessing. My hope is that this Mongolian beef will taste somewhat like P.F. Chang's Mongolian beef. Not quite hot enough oil. So I'm taking off the last pieces of beef here, and I'm gonna drain almost all of this oil except just a little bit, and I'm gonna turn this up, and we are almost ready to finish this dish off because we have our sauce already mixed and our green onions already chopped. This is definitely different than anything I've ever made before. So let me go drain most of this oil. I do want some of the oil on there because we need to cook our ginger and garlic, which we already have chopped. So I left just a little bit of oil in there, maybe a tablespoon or so. And now we're gonna add a good amount of garlic and a good amount of ginger. And I have that on high. And I'm just gonna cook this for a minute, get that garlic and ginger sauteed, scrape up some of those brown bits. Oh, it smells so good. As soon as that garlic and ginger hit that hot oil, yum. Now we're gonna cook some green onions. Oh my goodness, this smells so good. I hope we like it. Okay, now this is our sauce. It's quite a bit of sugar in it, so I'm gonna try to get all that out. The P.F. Chang's Mongolian beef is pretty sweet, and that's why I like it. We're supposed to cook this for about a minute or two until that sugar melts and it becomes a sauce. It looks beautiful. And now we're gonna put our beef back in here and coat this beef with that sticky, savory sauce. I'm gonna turn the heat off on this Mongolian beef because it's done.
Wow.
It smells good, doesn't it?
It does.
Josh, did you ever go to P.F. Chang's? I know we haven't been there together.
Yeah, I went there like one time when I was in high school, I think.
Did you get their Mongolian beef?
I don't remember. It was-
We went there for special occasions and we'd always get their Mongolian beef and it was so good because it was sweet. So I'm hoping this tastes something like that.
Look at this piece.
Does that look like a good piece?
Yeah, that looks awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna go for this one. Is it good? Mm-hmm. Is it good?
Holy cow, that's so good.
Is it?
It's insane.
I haven't tasted it yet. It's so tender.
This with some rice.
Yeah, Josh was sad that I didn't make rice, but I did make rice. Is it good? I think it's good. I'm not gonna lie, when I smelled that wine, go smell the wine, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like this. Because,
Oh, the wine was what did it.
well, I think that is what did it. That's what makes it taste so good, plus sugar. Let me smell it.
It doesn't smell bad to me, but
It just smelled very strong to me. But that is so good. I know I am so late to the game when it comes to making these smash burgers, but ever since I saw them the first time, I have wanted to try them, and I've seen people recreate them 100 different ways. Well, maybe not 100, but a lot of different ways. Today's the day we are finally going to try it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is make a little Big Mac sauce. So in here I have some mayo. I'm gonna add some ketchup to this. The good old Worcestershire sauce, one of my favorites. Some garlic powder, onion powder. I have a jar of homemade relish. This is a sweet relish, and some homemade Dijon mustard. Put a spoonful of that in there, maybe two. And then I'm gonna put maybe about a tablespoon of sweet relish in there. Mix that all together. Oh, you know what would be good in here, but I just ran out, would be some Chipotle powder to add some heat and smoke, but this will be really good on its own, just like this. Now it's time to make our smash burgers. I've got my beef, my salt, pepper. I'm actually gonna top these burgers with our marinated tomatoes that we just made because I think that would be delicious. Our tortillas, I think the way that will be the easiest to make these will actually be to do it on a cookie sheet. And I am only gonna make 2 of these for now. I'm gonna go ahead and get my skillet preheating while we make up these patties. I'm gonna take 2 of my tortillas, and I cook them a little bit more on one side, but I know that they're gonna be cooked twice. Take my beef and put it on here. And you could probably put as little or as much beef on this as you want. This is about 1/4 pound. Try to get it all the way to the ends. I just washed my hands, so that makes it easy so that we can go ahead and season these. I'm gonna put a good amount of black pepper on here. And then I'm gonna sprinkle with salt. A trick for even distribution of salt is the higher you have your hand up and sprinkle down, the more even the salt is distributed, versus if you're down here, it's harder to get it as even. Okay, that's perfect. That was so easy. I could see how making a bunch of these for a group of people would be really easy. I just got a Blackstone for Christmas, and if you had one of those where you could cook more than 2 at a time, versus my griddle, I can only cook 2, you could make a ton of these really, really quickly. Let's see, I gotta see if that's hot. It's not gonna take very long for these to cook because the beef is obviously very, very thin. So I wanna make sure that this is nice and hot. I'm gonna be able to tell when this beef is done because I can see through the tortilla on the other side and it's still pink. So I will flip this when that has turned golden brown, and hopefully at the bottom it will be nice and golden as well. Now what I'm not sure about is how am I gonna flip this while keeping it together? Let's see. Oh, lost a piece of beef. One side got nice and charred, but the other side didn't quite. That's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and cover that with some cheese. Are you supposed to brown the other side? I'm not sure. We're going with it, but look how caramelized that is right there. That crunchy bit looks delicious. I think this would be a lot easier to do if my tortillas were smaller, if they were like street taco size as opposed to this size. Yeah, I think I'm glad I flipped it over to cook the other side just a little bit. That will help the cheese melt. I'm gonna spread this sauce over half of it so that a bit of sauce is in every bite. Now you can top this however you want. Whatever ingredients make for the best burger for you, whether that's lettuce, caramelized onions, peppers, jalapenos. For me today, I'm gonna do our Big Mac sauce, lettuce, and some of these marinated tomatoes. I don't want very much of the marinade on here because I don't want my burger to get soggy at all. Just make sure there's at least 1 tomato in every bite. This was by far the easiest recipe so far to make. Let's give this a try. Okay, I'm glad that I toasted the back end or the back side of the tortilla because look at that. That looks so crunchy and delicious. I just dropped a tomato. It's gonna be hot. I probably should do this with 2 hands. The cool thing about this is that you're gonna get a little bit of beef, sauce, tomatoes, lettuce, cheese in every bite. This is delicious. Would I say that this replaces the craving of a good burger? No. Josh and I love a good burger. Whether it's a homemade burger or we go get a burger out, we both appreciate a really good burger. To me, this is different than a burger. Even though it has all the same flavor components other than obviously it's a tortilla instead of a hamburger bun, this is fantastic. But I would just think of it different than a burger. If I was comparing it to a burger, I would say I like a burger better. But this, standalone on its own, is delicious. I have seen so many different remakes of this recipe that I think would be really good. One where you make like a pot sticker or dumpling filling and you fry that and then you added like pickled carrots and daikon and you make it more of like a banh mi sandwich retake. I've seen one where you take falafel mix and you put falafel and then you put like tzatziki and cucumbers and lettuce and these tomatoes would be really good and make it more of a Mediterranean style. All of those sound really, really good. This is really, really good. It's just not a burger to me. And I was thinking more burger. I would make this again because it was so easy, a really easy way and less messy than making a burger. And that's nice and fried. It's not soggy on the bottom. I was a little worried about that. When Josh gets home later today, whew, I just lost half of his burger patty on the griddle. I will probably reheat this in the air fryer, and I will make him one up, and he will give this a taste test for us. This next recipe incorporates one of my new favorite spices, sumac. We're gonna make sumac chicken with potatoes and onions roasted in the oven with lots of fresh garlic. I just melted that because I actually want the garlic to be able to incorporate it so it's not frozen anymore. We've got some other spices here that we're gonna add to it. Plus, we are going to make a yogurt sauce. This recipe does not call for a yogurt sauce, but I think a yogurt sauce is going to be delicious with this recipe. So that's what we're gonna do. So we need to prep our chicken first. I'm gonna do that in this bowl. I'm gonna use chicken thighs that are boneless, skinless. This recipe calls for bone-in, skin-on chicken, which I think would be delicious. My family does not prefer bone-in, skin-on chicken. They prefer boneless, skinless. So I'm gonna make that substitution so that my family is super excited about eating this dinner. Normally when I use chicken thighs, I will even cut off the excess fat around the chicken thighs because I'm not using skin on bone-in chicken thighs, and we're gonna roast this in the oven for quite some time. I am gonna go ahead and leave that on for flavor, but if you like to cut that off for your family, you go ahead and do that. I'm also cutting this recipe down by quite a bit because we just don't quite need as much as this recipe calls for. Now I'm gonna cut the chicken down because it calls for 3 pounds of chicken. That's more chicken than I need for my family. But one thing I'm not gonna cut down is the amount of spices we're gonna add, because I always think recipes can use a little bit more spice. So even though I'm cutting this chicken down by 1 pound, I'm still gonna season it pretty heavily. I just added olive oil. Now I'm gonna add some of that fresh cracked black pepper that we just made. I just ordered more cumin because I am clearly almost out. I'm gonna use some herb salt because why not add a little bit more flavor? And then the star of the show is sumac. This is a spice that I just started using this last year. It's almost kind of a purpley maroon color, and it has this fresh, citrusy, unique smell and flavor that I have just been falling in love with. If you've never cooked with sumac, I highly recommend you try it because you just might love it. I made a carrot salad with sumac for the first time using sumac, and ever since then I was hooked. So I just added some sumac, and then we're also gonna add an ingredient that is pretty unique, I think, and we're gonna add some allspice. I'm falling in love with using these warmer spices in savory dishes. I'm more accustomed to using things like allspice and cardamom and clove and cinnamon in sweet things, but I'm having fun cooking with them in more savory components. And then lots and lots of garlic. I'm gonna put what would be the equivalent of 2 of those pucks in here. And then the recipe calls for Meyer lemons. My grocery store did not have Meyer lemons, but what they did have, of course, is a good old lemon. So I'm gonna squeeze the juice of half this lemon in here. This is my new favorite lemon juicer. It works so much better than my old one. So it's like this. You put the cut side towards you on the flat end, and then you squeeze, and you can see all that juice that came out. And I think it does a better job than my old lemon juicer, and it sits flat in my drawer, so it takes up less space in the dishwasher and takes up less space in my drawer. I did get one little lemon seed in there I'm gonna fish out. And now I'm gonna stir all this together. Try to get all of the garlic incorporated well and the spices incorporated well. This is gonna take me a minute. Sometimes chicken thighs, they're curled up and it takes a minute to have them kind of open up so you can get them well coated. Wow, this already smells great. I'm gonna set this aside for just a minute while I prep the kind of starch portion of this recipe. So this recipe has basically 2 components, the protein component and the potato component. And I don't feel like getting another dish dirty. So what I'm gonna do is actually put my chicken in here. We're gonna get our potato mixture all mixed in here, and then we're gonna lay it in here with the chicken. I can use this bowl for both the chicken and the potatoes because it's all gonna be baked in the oven at the same time. So now I'm going to set this both over here, and I'm gonna thinly slice my potatoes. I'm not gonna peel them. These are Yukon Golds. You could use a mandolin, but I'm okay if they're not perfect because they're gonna have plenty of time to fully cook in the oven, and I don't feel like getting my mandolin out when I have a knife that I can go ahead and chop these potatoes with this knife. If I wanted my potatoes paper thin, I would go ahead and pull out my mandolin, but I don't need them paper thin here. And if you don't like the peels of Yukon Gold potatoes, go ahead and cut the peels off. But I actually kind of like them, so I'm gonna leave them on. I'm gonna slice up 2 red onions, because these are pretty small. If you had one really large red onion, just slice 1 up. And I'm gonna keep the onion slices relatively large because this is actually not just like a flavor component, but it's gonna be part of the vegetable side for this dinner. So I'm gonna season these separate from our potatoes, but now all of our components are basically done, other than I need to slice up a lemon. For the potatoes, I'm gonna start with olive oil, pepper, and there's a little bit of seasoning from the chicken, and that's totally fine if that's in there. And now I need some salt. And this time I just have some regular salt. Get a couple pinches of that in there. And I'm gonna get in here with my hands and try to get that seasoning even on these potatoes. Now, one thing that really drew me toward this recipe was not just the fact that it was sumac chicken, which was really intriguing to me because I've never had that combination, but it was how this recipe was put together and presented. I thought was really, really beautiful. So what we're gonna do is layer this chicken with, not layer it, but we're going to put the chicken single file layer on the bottom of this baking dish. Now, if you wanted to throw this on a sheet pan, you could certainly do that, but I'm gonna do it the way that the picture showed, where she has her chicken and then she takes potato and kind of tucks the potato in and around the chicken, which I think will be so yummy when this cooks up, because you're gonna get some of that chicken flavor on the potatoes, some of that sumac on the potatoes, and it's just gonna look really pretty and kind of unique. But if you're in a big hurry, you could probably just throw this on a sheet pan and skip this step. But I think this isn't gonna take me very long, and it's gonna be pretty. If I have a little bit of the chicken kind of tucked up around the potato, I think that would be good too. Add more flavor to the potatoes. Now that we have our potatoes in our dish, we're gonna season up our onions. I'm gonna do the same thing, a little bit of olive oil, pepper, and salt. And I'm doing this separate just because I thought it'd be easier to layer this if it was all separate, but you could probably just mix all of it together if you wanted to. Now we're gonna take these seasoned onions and put them in between the potatoes and chicken. This to me is looking pretty enough to serve at a dinner party, and you saw how easy that was. I cannot wait to give this a try. I'm gonna throw a couple sprigs of fresh thyme on here. I have 2, 4, 5. Now we're going to top with a couple things of lemon. And then I'm gonna drizzle it with just a touch more olive oil on those lemons. And just a pinch more salt. That was so easy, especially for how absolutely stunning this is. This is probably gonna bake for a good 40 minutes or so. So you saw, didn't take much time to throw that together. Now it is gonna take some time to cook, but that is where now I can wash up the one dish that I made. Well, I made 3 dishes. I made the cutting board dirty, I made 1 bowl dirty, and I made a knife and the lemon squeezer. If you didn't wanna make the lemon squeezer dirty, squeeze that lemon by hand, and you would save yourself a dish. Now, this recipe does not call for a sauce, but for some reason, just like a yogurt, fresh sauce on top of that sounds incredible, so I'm gonna make it. I love a good sauce. Now I'm gonna show you just how easy it is to throw together a simple herb yogurt sauce. You can use whatever kind of herbs you have on hand, whatever kind of herbs you like. You can flavor it however you want. And I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do it today based on what I have on hand. First thing is I have just some Greek yogurt. If I had regular yogurt, I would use regular yogurt. If you don't have yogurt and you have sour cream, you could use sour cream. If you wanted to add a little bit more creaminess to it, you could add some mayo if you like that flavor. But what I'm gonna use is probably about, there's probably about 3/4 of a cup of full fat Greek yogurt that I'm just gonna throw into the bottom of my blender. I happen to have some parsley, so I'm gonna put, maybe not that much because we don't have that much yogurt here. I don't know, maybe 2 tablespoons of parsley. I love cilantro, so I'm gonna put maybe 3 tablespoons of cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, leave that out. I've got 2 green onions here. I'm gonna put, I think just 1 green onion actually. And I'm gonna chop it up just a little bit just to help the blender along, just so that it doesn't have to blend quite so long. I'm gonna use some of our garlic that I have thawed here. You could use dried garlic if that's what you have. A good amount of that, because we are a garlic loving family. And then I wanna mimic some of the same flavors that I have in this dish. So I'm gonna put a pinch of salt, pinch of sumac, because this is sumac chicken, pepper, and I think since I still have it out, I'm gonna put a pinch of cumin. Just like that. So this is gonna be a green, delicious, creamy sauce. You could use a food processor if you have that. I'm gonna turn this down. I didn't put that much in here, so it's gonna take a second to get this all blended together. I'm just gonna push it down a little bit so that my blender blade can catch all that goodness. If you want a really smooth sauce, make this really smooth. If you'd prefer a little more texture to it, don't blend it up quite so much. I did have to put about maybe a 1/4 cup more yogurt in it because it wasn't catching my blade, and I just used some regular yogurt for that. Yum. I think it needs something. I think what I'm gonna add is a little bit more sumac, because I want some brightness, but I don't wanna add any citrus to this because there is so much lemon juice and the lemons on our chicken. I don't really wanna make this any more sour because I want it to kind of balance out that, but it needs a little bit more brightness. So I think just another pinch of sumac in there, blend that up, and then we're gonna give that a try. Okay, let's try that now. I think it needs a little more salt too. Did I add salt earlier? Now I can't remember. It's always okay to taste and adjust the seasonings as you cook. Everyone has different preferences for how seasoned they like stuff. And so just taste, 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 adjust, adjust, adjust as needed. All right, that's what I needed. Oh my goodness. Go make yourself some yogurt sauce. I can't really keep this in my fridge very long because I go through it so quickly, because I like this type of sauce on almost any sort of dish. I would be happy to eat this kind of sauce on any grilled meat, steak, tacos, burrito bowls. Anything would be good with this sauce on it, except maybe a cardboard box. I'm gonna get this into here. Look at the color of that sauce. This I could eat with a spoon. I mean, probably I would not eat this with a spoon, but I'm just telling you, this type of sauce is so delicious and super easy. And if I was thinking, I probably should have made enough to fill this in a whole entire container, because I know we would easily go through this. So this is gonna be popped in the fridge, and now we just wait for this chicken to be done. You can see how beautiful it is. It's got quite a bit of time before it's gonna be done, but this is going to be delicious, I think. This is starting to smell incredible. I think we should take its temperature of the chicken and check to see if the potatoes are done. Oh yeah, chicken's done. You can see I'm at 200 degrees. This is why I like to use chicken thighs when I can, because they are so much more forgiving when it comes to overcooking versus chicken breast. And our potatoes are super tender. I'm gonna get some potato down first. These potatoes are so tender, and they've been cooking in all that flavor from the chicken and the onions. I'm gonna get some of that onion in here too. Oh my goodness, it smells so good. This is unlike anything I've ever really made before. And of course, we've got to top this with our yogurt sauce. It might not need this yogurt sauce, but I love a good sauce. So easy. Let's give this a try. This dish, I think, would be pretty enough to serve if you had guests coming over. I will have to think that through because that was so easy to put together. I'm gonna try it, I think, without the yogurt sauce first, just to see what it's like on its own. So I wanna make sure I get a little bit of our onion, some of our chicken, and of course, a piece of potato. If I can get it on my fork, it's all so tender, it's hard to stay on my fork. Friend, delicious. Onions, potatoes, chicken on its own, delicious. Now, you will notice that I seasoned it really well with salt. In the notes, the recipe said, do not be afraid of salt with this one, and it is yummy. Wow, I could not believe the level of flavor coming through. It's so rich and savory, and you saw how simple the ingredients are that we put in there. I'm now gonna taste that with a little bit of our yogurt sauce. Potatoes are not my actual favorite vegetable or starch. When it comes to starchy things, I prefer pasta, rice over potatoes. I like potatoes. I even prefer sweet potatoes over regular potatoes, but I'm always looking for ways to cook with potatoes because I actually grow a lot of potatoes in my garden. And this is amazing. I think cooking the potatoes with the chicken just adds such flavor. I love potatoes, I should say. When I roast them, I'll put a bunch of potatoes on the bottom of the slow cooker, and then I'll put a chuck roast over the top, and those potatoes that cook with all of the drippings from the roast. So good. This is kind of that same thing, but with chicken. Yum. Now I'm gonna try it with our yogurt sauce. Oh my goodness. It was good before. Now it's over the top. The only thing I would do different with this is I would probably do one more red onion because these red onions are so sweet and delicious. This is so good. This first recipe we're gonna make just screams fall to me, and it's a creamy chicken stroganoff, and we're just gonna make everything right in the slow cooker. So I have 4 chicken thighs here that I'm gonna lay down in my slow cooker first thing. And this is gonna be so easy because I've already done some of the prep. I have 2 little balls of frozen garlic. Use whatever kind of garlic you want. I like to process a lot of garlic at one time, freeze it, and then when I need to use it, I don't have to peel and chop garlic. I also have here, when I was making that marinara sauce, I diced too many onions. I threw these in the fridge, and now I have onions that we're just gonna lay in this crock pot next. I did myself a favor, and I bought pre-diced mushrooms, but I do need to wash these. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these mushrooms into this colander. I'm gonna wash them, and we'll bring them back to the crock pot. I will link all of these recipes for you down below, and we are gonna be making one recipe at a time. And this is gonna be over a few weeks, probably 2 weeks. So I will also timestamp these recipes for you too. So if you want to go directly to a recipe that sounds good to you, they will be linked down below. So now I'm gonna season this with a good amount of salt and pepper. That's just gonna add a lot of beautiful flavor. And then we're gonna add some Worcestershire sauce. This is basically a dump and go recipe. We're gonna let the slow cooker do all the work for us today. This is my favorite time of year to pull out the slow cooker. I'm gonna put about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard in there. And we are going to put a little bit of wine in here. I love cooking with wine. This is almost like a chicken tetrazzini, because chicken tetrazzini kind of reminds me of stroganoff, just like a white chicken version of it. And so you probably could call this slow cooker chicken tetrazzini as well. So here I have a good dry white wine that I would enjoy drinking. We're gonna add a half a cup of this. If you don't cook with wine or drink wine or keep wine in your house, substitute chicken broth for the wine, because we are going to be putting some chicken broth in. I'm gonna shake this just a little bit. This just happens to be some homemade chicken broth. And we are gonna put a half a cup of this in here as well. Now this doesn't seem like very much liquid, but don't you worry, when this is cooking, the onions, the mushrooms, and the chicken is going to release a lot of moisture and create a beautiful sauce. So when I am using the slow cooker, I try not to add too much broth up front, because you can always add more. So I'm gonna get this plugged in. I'm gonna put this on high, and we're gonna let this go for about 4 hours. Hopefully I will be done with our canning project by then. We do have a couple more ingredients we are gonna add, but we're not gonna add those until closer to when it's done. Now that didn't even take me 5 minutes to prep tonight's dinner, because I had my garlic already pre-chopped and my onions chopped, and I purchased pre-sliced mushrooms. So if you want to give yourself the convenience of chopped onions, you can buy them in the frozen section. You can also chop your own onions if you find them on sale, throw those in the freezer, and then you have a convenience item that you could just throw some frozen onions in here. Anytime I do myself a favor of doing a little bit of prep work in ahead of time, it always pays off in the end. So I will see you back when we have tonight's dinner. So this now has been cooking for quite some time, so let's move on to the next step. I want to thicken my sauce a little bit. So how we're going to thicken the sauce is with our sour cream. And I'm going to put half of this sour cream into this bowl. So about 8 ounces. That's a pint, so roughly 8 ounces. And then I'm gonna put about 1/4 cup of flour into the sour cream, and I'm actually gonna whisk this together. There is a French technique called I can't remember what the name of it is. I'm sure one of you remember, but it's basically where you take flour and you mix it in with butter, and you put that into a soup or something like that, and the flour doesn't clump even though you're putting it into a hot liquid because you have kind of dissolved it into a fat. So I'm doing that same technique with this sour cream, but instead of using butter, we're using sour cream. And I'm gonna whisk this to make sure there's no clumps. Most crock pot stroganoffs call for a cream of mushroom soup, and we are using this technique instead of using cream of mushroom soup, and it's just as easy as opening a jar of cream of mushroom soup. So now we're gonna take our flour sour cream mixture and we're gonna add it to our stroganoff base. You can probably hear my canners going. I am canning a bunch of homegrown tomatoes into diced tomatoes right now, and they are currently processing, and that's why I wanted to get a slow cooker recipe going, so I didn't have to think about dinner tonight after spending a good amount of the day in the kitchen. I'm just gonna whisk that in there. You could make this exact recipe using ground beef if you wanted. Just brown up some ground beef instead of adding chicken. Use beef broth and red wine instead of white wine. Same technique with thickening it up, and you would have yourself a beef stroganoff, which I can write that recipe up as well, and I will put that down in the description box. So if you want to make either slow cooker beef stroganoff or slow cooker white chicken stroganoff, it will be down in the description box for you. So this sauce is the perfect thickness. It's not too runny at all. So let me show you how we're gonna dish this up and serve it for tonight's dinner. So my favorite way to have stroganoff, whether it is chicken or beef stroganoff, is to serve it up in a bowl. And I like it with egg noodles, but again, if you wanted mashed potatoes or serve this over rice, you could certainly do that as well. And then the way we like to do it is to top it with a little bit more sour cream. I'm just gonna mix this just a little bit. It's piping hot. This is the perfect fall cozy dinner after spending a long time in the kitchen today. I wanna give this one final taste test with you. It's so hot. My canners have about 20 minutes left. We're gonna sit down, enjoy a nice dinner while the canners finish processing. And dinner didn't take, total maybe 15 minutes of time. Would have taken a little bit more time if I had to dice the onion, the garlic, and the mushrooms. But sometimes it's nice to give yourself those little bit of shortcuts. Delicious, cozy. I will see you next time we are making a crock pot dinner. And I'm excited to sit down and eat this for dinner. I saw a recipe and it was very intriguing. It was French onion braised chuck roast, or like slow cooked, pull apart tender chuck roast. And I thought that sounded incredible. And I went ahead and read about 5 or 6 recipes to find one that I wanted to make, and I couldn't find one that was exactly what I wanted. So on this day, I make this recipe up. And it is probably one of our new favorite dinners. We devoured this. It was so good. So I'm going to show you how we make it. The first thing I'm going to do is take this chuck roast. This was one that I had bought from a local farmer, and it was in my freezer. I pulled it out of my freezer a couple days ago and let it thaw in my refrigerator. And now it is ready to go ahead and trim any excess fat on it. We don't need any big pieces of fat. There's still plenty of fat running through this piece of meat that the outside pieces that I could cut off, I went ahead and trimmed off. I now am going to brown this chuck roast really, really well because we are going to cook this chuck roast in the slow cooker. You could cook this in the oven, low and slow, in a Dutch oven if you wanted, but I was busy on this day and I didn't really want to have to worry about babysitting my dinner. So I went ahead and put it in the slow cooker. Now to the cast iron that we browned our chuck roast in, I put a lot of onions. This was the onions that I grew in my garden last year, and so they were really little, so I probably put like 10 or 12 onions in here with a good 3 tablespoons of butter. But if you were using large store-bought onions, probably 3 or 4 or 5 would be really good. Now, I make up this recipe because I couldn't find one I wanted. So I will write this up, and I took measurements on everything so I can write it up and link it down below for you. So once my onions were beautifully caramelized, because we're making a French onion slow-cooked beef roast, I went ahead and added 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and 1/3 cup of flour. So a lot of the recipes I was looking at called for gravy packets. I don't keep gravy packets in my house, and I don't keep cans of French onion soup in my house either, but I have all the ingredients to make this. So that's why I figured I could go ahead and make it myself. So here to the caramelized onions, I added some thyme, pepper, a lot of whole garlic cloves, and 1/3 cup of flour. I cooked that flour down for a couple minutes with the butter, and then I'm going to add my chicken broth. Now you could use beef broth if you wanted here. I'm using chicken broth because that's the only kind of broth I have made up in my house right now. I get that question, why don't I use beef broth ever? And it's because I don't have beef broth in my house at this point. So chicken broth works as a good substitute. So to that sauce, I'm going to let it simmer. I added about a tablespoon of grainy mustard and 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. I figured by adding the flour to this and kind of creating a thicker sauce, that's going to replace the gravy packet. I have never done that much flour in a slow cooker recipe before, and it works perfect. So at this point, I'm thinking maybe this is a little bit thick, but you will see this creates the best gravy. Absolutely delicious. So I'm going to pour that sauce with my chuck roast in the slow cooker. I had my slow cooker on high while I was making the sauce. The onions took a long time to caramelize. They took about 25 minutes. So that's why the slow cooker is bubbling away, because the sides of that slow cooker were hot, because I figured the chuck roast could just start to cook while I cooked down the onions. I'm going to put this on high for about 8 hours and just let this go. Now, I could not decide what I wanted to serve with this beef. So I decided, after lots of thought, I'm going to make hoagie rolls, and we're going to turn this beef into French onion sandwiches. And it is incredible. My other 2 thoughts that would be really, really good with this meal would be to serve this over mashed potatoes, because it does make this really, really beautiful gravy, or over egg noodles. And I actually end up taking some of the leftovers, because we end up using some of these hoagie rolls for sandwich bread, because again, I don't have any sandwich bread made up. So after we went through all the naans and I had some of this, we were using this as sandwich bread. I still had some of the beef that needed to be used up. So I ended up putting the rest of it over some egg noodles, and it was fantastic. So here we're going to make some hoagie rolls. I will link this cookbook that I'm getting this recipe out of down below, but she also has a blog post. This is the same author as who created the naan recipe, and so I can link both the blog post recipe and the cookbook down below. But what we need to do again with this recipe is we need to grind our wheat. This recipe called for, I think, 100% hard white wheat berries. And we're going to mix in all the ingredients minus the yeast and let this sit, well, it was only supposed to sit for like 15-20 minutes, but I hadn't showered yet, so I go shower and then come back, so it ends up sitting longer than that. I was not ready for the day when this is where the dough rested with the water before adding the yeast. I actually let it rest for about an hour and a half because I was getting ready. That's the beauty of fresh milled wheat, is if you mix the wheat in with the water, but you don't add the yeast, you're not under a time crunch. Once you add the yeast, you're kind of under a time crunch. But I got ready, and then I added the yeast, and then I let that sit for about an hour. Here you can see this is what the chuck roast is looking like after just a few hours cooking away. It still has quite a bit of time it needs to cook away. At this point in the day, I am ready for the day, and my roll dough is ready to go. So this is where you can see this dough is pretty sticky. That's the one thing, is I have to resist the urge to add more flour, and I'm learning that the more I work with not just fresh milled wheat, but also all-purpose flour dough recipes. Even with all-purpose flour dough recipes, it is best to err on the side of less flour is better than more flour, because you're going to end up with a lighter, more moist bread product. So I'm going to turn this dough out. It rose perfectly for the first time. I'm going to shape this into hoagie rolls. Now, the recipe says to make 4 hoagie rolls with this. These end up being huge. So you could absolutely, if you wanted more like an individual size hoagie roll, make 8 out of here. But what I did was 1 hoagie served Josh and I. We cut the sandwich in half and we each had half. And this made a good size sandwich for us. But if you wanted individual hoagie rolls, then you could divide this into 8. To shape the hoagie rolls, I just kind of flatten the dough out a little bit, roll it up, and tuck the ends in. These are not perfectly shaped. I did go through a couple of them and redo it a few times because I was, having a hard time shaping these, but they end up turning out perfect. No one's going to know that I had a hard time shaping these. But I do flatten them out quite a bit. So just like if I was to make hamburger buns homemade, once you shape it to what you want, it is best to flatten out those rolls so that because they will puff up, but they won't go outwards. And so you want to make sure you have enough surface area, flat surface area, to put your sandwich on. So these don't look very big yet at this point, and I'm thinking, man, these are kind of skinny. And I don't know if we're going to be able to make good size sandwiches out of these, but you just wait. There is plenty of yeast in here that the yeast is going to activate. It's going to do its thing, and it's going to make a beautiful hoagie. But before I let it rise for the second time, I do take a little bit of oil and I top the hoagies with that just so they don't dry out. I cover them with some plastic wrap, and then I'm going to let this sit for about an hour. I'm checking on my beef. It's not quite as tender as I want. I really want it to be fall apart tender. So I just check on it. I turn the beef, rotate it so that the bottom is on the top and the top is on the bottom. And I put the lid back on and I let this cook. You can see already, look how thick and beautiful this sauce is. Absolutely incredible. The onions were starting to stick just a little bit to the slow cooker, so I was running my fork along the edge of the slow cooker to make sure that we didn't get any scorching. And I put my hoagie rolls next to the slow cooker so that they would rise next to the heat of the slow cooker. And after about an hour, they were well puffed, and I'm going to get those in the oven. They did not take very long to cook. You could probably put an egg wash on them if you wanted, or brush them with butter after they come out of the oven. I didn't do either of those things, and they still looked beautiful. At this point, it's been quite a few hours now, and this has been sitting and cooking away. Here you can really see how thick and beautiful this sauce is. The one thing with this sauce, because it was pretty thick and rich, is that I did have to go through about once an hour or so and just make sure that the onions weren't sticking to the side of the pot. Our beef is beautifully tender at this point, so I'm going to pull the beef out of the slow cooker, and I am going to remove any big pieces of fat that are still on the chuck roast and the bone and things like that, so that I just have nice tender meat going to go back into the slow cooker. And because I did a pretty good job trimming the chuck roast before it went in, there isn't a ton of fat that needs to be separated, which was really nice. So like that piece right there that I just took off, that's not something Josh and I want to eat. So I always take the time to remove any of those bits. Now I'm going to shred the beef. This is Josh with his fork. He wanted to give it a taste test because my house smelled incredible. And he's taking a sneak taste test, and it is so good. This is probably one of the best chuck roasts I have made, and I've made quite a few of them recently because, like I said, this is one of my family's favorite cuts of meat at this point right now, and so I am trying to make a ton of it, and this is at least my favorite, I think, and I think Josh would probably argue this is probably one of his favorites as well. So I'm putting my shredded beef back into the sauce. Here you can see why this would be so good with egg noodles or over mashed potatoes. But I chose to turn this into a sandwich. So this is what the hoagie looks like coming out of the oven. Nice and soft. I'm going to cut this in half, and then I'm going to cut it because I'm going to make 2 sandwiches, one for me, one for Josh. And fresh milled wheat is not like store-bought whole wheat flour. It comes out so much more fluffy and soft and flavorful. I have found when I use store-bought whole wheat flour, it's kind of dry and doesn't have a ton of beautiful nutty flavor. But with this fresh milled wheat, it has so much nutty flavor and it's not dry. Every time I make a new roll or something like that, I'm always surprised how moist, I know people don't like that word. What's another word? Not dry. How not dry the roll is. They're just so yummy and they feel super nourishing and delicious. But this sandwich is not done. We are going to top it with Gruyere cheese. This is what makes it French onion, between the onions and the Gruyere cheese. And I'm going to put this under the broiler and I'm going to toast this for about 4 or 5 minutes under the broiler. This is what makes it French onion. So if you wanted to make this beef and serve it over mashed potatoes, you could put the Gruyere cheese over top of the beef, over top of the mashed potatoes, or you could put the Gruyere cheese in the mashed potatoes and then put the beef on top if you wanted. That would be delicious. Or like what I did when we used the leftover beef, I just cooked up some egg noodles, warmed up the beef in the gravy, and then mixed in some Gruyere cheese. So you got that Gruyere cheese flavor with the egg noodles. And that was delicious. My favorite way was with the egg noodles. This was Josh's favorite way with the sandwiches. He had this for lunch, I think 3 times. He really, really enjoyed it. And so did I. And there you can see what they look like coming out of the oven. This recipe is going to be slow cooker pork carnitas. We're going to make a homemade sauce for it to cook in all day. And then I had some inspiration in the afternoon to make some homemade corn tortillas. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that and how we're going to take this really yummy pulled pork and we're going to put it in our corn tortillas and kind of bake it in the oven to get a really crispy pork taco. So I have seen these type of recipes go around online for a long time. I've never done it and it is fantastic. So the first thing we're going to do is put some pork shoulder or whatever kind of pork you have, ideally one that is a tougher cut like a pork butt or pork shoulder, in the slow cooker. And then we're going to make a yummy sauce to go on it. Now these are the Cara oranges. I've showed you these when we've gone shopping together, but I wanted to show you the inside of them. They are incredibly delicious. They are almost like a blood orange in color. They're not quite as red as a blood orange, but they're sweet and they are our new favorite orange. So I'm going to juice some of those because I had those on hand. If you only have some bottled orange juice, go ahead and use that. I'm also going to use some fresh limes that I have on hand, and I am going to make one substitution to the recipe I'm going to link down below. It called for chipotles in adobo. I did not have any of those. I wanted to make this because I found the pork in my freezer and I wanted to use it up. And I thought I had chipotles in adobo when I decided to make this. And then when I was searching around this morning, I couldn't find it. And so I was looking at the back of a jar of chipotles in adobo online and looking at the ingredients. And I thought, you know what? I have all the ingredients. I think I could kind of make a substitution. So I figured I would show you what that substitution is. And this is my new favorite citrus juicer. It is meant for lemons and limes, but I was able to get the orange in it. So here is the substitution for the chipotles in adobo. I'm going to put in some tomato paste, apple cider vinegar, and then chipotle powder. When I was looking at the ingredients, that's mostly what it is, and then other spices, but we're going to get those other spices with what the recipe calls for. We're going to put in a ton of the spices we like. So we've got cumin, coriander, garlic powder, onion powder, salt, pepper, a lot of paprika. This is smoked paprika, but use smoked or unsmoked, whatever you have on hand, and a good amount of oregano. I'm just going to mix that together, and that is going to be our sauce. The recipe I'm linking for you says to blend your sauce in the blender. That's because if you use chipotles in adobo, they're obviously whole jalapenos and they need to be blended, but I'm making my own homemade substitution, so I don't need to worry about that. I also added a couple tablespoons of honey to kind of counteract that spiciness of the Chipotles, I do taste this, or Chipotle powder. I use Chipotle powder. The nice thing actually about this substitution, the tomato paste and Chipotle powder and vinegar instead of using the Chipotles and adobo, is you can control the spicy level of it if your family doesn't love spice. Not everyone in my family does, so I was able to put a little less Chipotle powder and a little more smoked paprika to get that smoky flavor and the vinegar flavor without it being too spicy. So now we have our homemade sauce mixed up. I'm going to chop an onion, and I did leave kind of the root end because we're not going to eat this onion. This onion is purely for delicious flavor. I'm going to nestle that onion in the slow cooker. I'm going to get a lot of garlic in here. This pork was already kind of chopped into smaller pieces, and so I didn't have to do that. But if you just had a whole pork butt or pork shoulder, you could throw that in here. You don't need to chop it up. Just know it'll take a little longer to cook. I'm going to pour our yummy sauce over it, get the lid on it, and get this slow cooking. So like I said, I had a very busy computer workday on this day, and I wanted a recipe where I could just have it ready to go for me when I was ready for it. That is what I have found the beauty of slow cookers is they can wait for you, and they will just be sitting there waiting for you when you're ready to come back to them. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning, putting all my spices away. You could do the same thing probably if you had a favorite taco seasoning. I don't have any taco seasoning in my house right now. If you didn't want to get all these spices out, just juice some oranges or use orange juice, juice a couple limes or use bottled lime juice and your favorite taco seasoning, and that would be delicious as well. Now that our protein is going and I've kind of tidied up the kitchen, we're going to get going on a sauce. I am a sauce loving person, and a good sauce can just bring an average dinner, I think, over the top. So I have one bunch of cilantro going in the blender. We're going to make a jalapeno sour cream kind of dressing or dipping sauce. I'm going to slice this jalapeno in half and get the seeds out. You could leave the seeds in if you wanted. And then I'm going to use some of my cowboy candy, which is a pickled sweet jalapeno. And we're going to go ahead and put a couple big spoonfuls of that in there. And then we are going to juice 1 lemon and put in about 1.5 cups of sour cream. I salt and peppered it. I added a little bit of garlic powder, cumin, and coriander. I thought, oh, I probably shouldn't have put those spices away because I had to pull them back out to put them in the sauce, but that's how cooking goes in my house, is sometimes I do double the work. Once I've got all my seasonings in there, I'm going to go ahead and blend it up. And if you wanted a little bit more chunky, you could go ahead and do this in a food processor. I wanted this to be a really smooth dipping sauce, so I threw mine in the blender. And then I do give it a taste and I adjust the seasoning. It was pretty spicy. The cowboy candy I made was pretty hot. I would have left it just like that if it was my own sauce and no one else in my family was going to eat it. But I'm the only one that loves really, really hot things. So I did add a little bit of honey. I blended that up and that balanced out some of that heat. It was kind of borderline for Josh. He did really enjoy it and he ate a lot of it, but it was a little spicy. So I'm glad I added that little bit of honey. So here it's mid-afternoon now. Dinner has been cooking for quite some time and I am ready to get going on, I guess it's 1:04. I'm getting ready to go on making some homemade corn tortillas. I had been sitting at my computer for a very long time and I was ready to do something other than staring at my computer. So I got inspired to make tortillas. You do not have to make your own homemade tortillas if you don't want to. Use corn or flour for how we're going to turn these into a crispy, crunchy taco once we shred our pork. But I wanted to kind of get out of my office. I wanted to get into the kitchen. I wanted to make some tortillas. So that's what we're doing. I have tried quite a few different corn massas and I keep coming back to this one. I just get it at my local grocery store. I can link it for you if you don't have it at your grocery store, but I really like the flavor of the King Arthur's organic masa. And I just follow their recipe on the back of the package. I did pull out my scale for this, so the only ingredients in this are masa, salt, and water. You're going to mix that together. And then I did need to end up adding a little bit more masa because the dough was feeling a little bit sticky to me. This is me still measuring out with my scale how much water and masa flour it said to use, but once you kind of start making tortillas, you will get a feel for, oh, on this day it happens to need a little bit more or it needs a little bit less. And I could tell that it was a little too sticky, so I did end up adding a little bit more masa flour. And then I have my tortilla press out because we are going to use the tortilla press to press out these corn tortillas. So at this point, I am just mixing it together and kind of getting a feel for the dough. Once I'm happy with it, we can start cooking. Now, before I even started making the dough, I started preheating my griddle pan because I want my griddle pan nice and hot before I start cooking these. I just eyeball how big to make these. I grab a thing of dough and I press it into a little disc, and then I put it between my parchment paper. I press down what is about 75% of the thickness, I think, and then I always rotate it, press down the last bit, and that way I feel like I get a more even tortilla from one end to the other. And then we will go ahead and just put this onto our preheated griddle pan. Now, I didn't brown these as much as I could have if I was going to serve these for tacos on this night. They were a little bit light on the toastiness, and I did that thinking I don't need to toast them all the way. I mean, they're fully cooked, but they're not like super brown because we're going to stuff them with cheese and shredded pork and then kind of, I want to say fry them because I put oil on them, but we do not fry them. We bake them in the oven, but we get that kind of crunchy fried texture with the oil that we're going to bake them on in the oven. And I'll show you how to do that when we get to that point, but it is still afternoon and I am still making the tortillas and the pork is still cooking away. My house smells incredible, by the way. So I'm just going to flip these. These do not take very long to cook. And we got quite a few of them. I ended up only using half of them for this dinner. And then the other half that I made on this day, I threw in the freezer. And now I have about 10 corn tortillas that are homemade, that are in my freezer, that are going to be just waiting for me next time I need some corn tortillas. The dough on some of them did want to stick a little bit to the parchment paper, so I do end up adding just a tiny bit of avocado oil, just like a drop, to my parchment paper, and I rub it around the parchment paper so that the masa dough comes off the parchment paper a little bit easier. See how easy that was? Much easier with just a little bit of oil on them. One of the biggest tricks when it comes to making homemade tortillas, whether that is flour or corn, I have found for myself to get a soft and tender tortilla that doesn't break on you, is to make sure when you take them off the griddle pan to put them directly into a clean dish towel and let the steam finish the cooking process. Or I don't know if it actually finishes the cooking process. They're fully cooked when I take them off the griddle pan, but something about having a stack of hot tortillas in a towel steaming together really lends to a nice, soft, and pliable tortilla that is way less likely to break on you. So here is our stack of tortillas. And you can see I probably could have browned them a little bit more if I was cooking these to have just plain tacos, but these are going to be turned into crunchy tacos, so they will get nice and crispy in the oven. So we have a whole big stack of tortillas. I think the recipe said it was supposed to make 16 tortillas. I'm pretty sure that mine might have been a little bit on the smaller side because I think I got more like 25 tortillas. And look how beautiful this pork looks. It is much later in the day, and I'm gonna take this pork out of the slow cooker, let it cool just a little bit so that I can shred it up. My family doesn't like any big pieces of fat, so what I always do is when I cook any sort of protein like this in a slow cooker, I take it out of the slow cooker, I let it cool just a little bit, and then I shred the pork with my hands so that I can remove any of the excess fat that we aren't wanting to eat. Now here I did pour this amazing broth into my fat separator, and I'm going to get the broth back into the slow cooker, and I'm going to just keep the fat off so that that can be discarded. Now, one thing I always like to do is taste for seasonings. Does it need any salt? Does it need any pepper? Does it need any acid? Are the flavors balanced? Is it too spicy? Do I need to add a little extra honey? And it tasted perfect, so we did not need to add anything. And now I'm going to shred up this pork. I really do think this is where the slow cooker shines, is with making tough cuts of meat super tender and super delicious. Now on this night, we were ready to eat dinner, but one of our neighbors called and asked for Josh's help on a project. So I was planning to go ahead and turn this pork right into the pork tacos right now at this point, but Josh got called away, so I went ahead and didn't want to make dinner until Josh was ready to eat. So I end up taking this pork and putting it back on keep warm so that it would be warm and ready for me when we were ready to make our tacos. I didn't shred it quite enough with my hands, so I went in there with this spoon and a fork, and I'm going to shred it just a little bit more. At this point, Josh is back home, so we can finish this dinner. I have a cookie sheet with a piece of parchment paper on, purely for easy cleanup, and then I'm going to get some olive oil, probably about a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of olive oil on my piece of parchment paper, and this is what is going to help crisp up these corn tortillas that we made earlier. I'm going to lay 4 corn tortillas out. We're going to end up making 6 on this night, and then the rest of it I just put the corn tortillas in the freezer. And I want to get a little bit of oil on the entire one side of the tortilla so that when I fold it over, it's going to have a little bit of oil on it and it's going to get nice and crispy. The first thing I'm going to add to these tacos is a little bit of sharp cheddar cheese. That's what I had on hand, so that's what I'm using. Use whatever kind of cheese you want. And then we're going to top that with some of our pork. This pork had such delicious, like smoky, sweet flavor. It was so good. And you could do this technique with any kind of protein. This is the first time I've ever done this. I've seen this technique many times online, but I've never actually done it. And now that I've done it, I will absolutely be doing this technique of making basically kind of like a crunchy taco. And you could use flour tortillas, corn tortillas, any kind of protein. You could even do beans and cheese and skip the, oh my goodness, I'm just now thinking it's kind of like a quesadilla. I was thinking they were crispy tacos, but now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, did I just make quesadillas in the oven? I don't know. Whatever they're called, they are delicious. I was having a little bit of hard time getting the tortilla to stay folded over, but I just kind of pushed on it a little bit and then it would stay folded over. And here's where you can see I want a little bit of oil on both sides of the tortilla so that it gets crispy. And then I thought I should probably have a little bit of cheese on both sides of the protein so that once it melts, it kind of holds the taco, or now I guess maybe quesadilla together. That's so funny. I can't believe I just thought that maybe I actually just made quesadillas in the oven. I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees and we are going to get these quesadilla tacos in there. And then while that's cooking, I'm going to start some rice. I have just some white rice in my Instant Pot. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. I'm going to get that going, and we're going to make a copycat Chipotle cilantro rice. I just push the rice button, and my rice usually turns out pretty good when I use my Instant Pot. I don't really like cooking rice on the stove, so I used to have a rice cooker, and when I got my Instant Pot, I had both my rice cooker and my Instant Pot for a long time, and then I realized I think an Instant Pot can do the job for both. And the key to good cilantro rice is to add a little bit of olive oil and lemon juice. Chipotle actually uses lemon juice, not lime juice. It's a little bit sweeter than lime juice, so that's what I add. And then I have some freeze-dried cilantro from last year's garden still, so I'm going to put that in here, mix that up, and dinner is almost done. On this night, it was kind of a pantry pull because I had not gone to the store yet, and so I was trying to use things I already had on hand. I already had the pork in my freezer that I wanted to get used up, and the rest of it were things that I had on hand. I actually didn't even have tortillas. That's why I made the corn tortillas. But if I had tortillas, I maybe wouldn't have gone through the effort of making homemade corn tortillas, but they turned out delicious. And now I happen to have quite a few extra corn tortillas. So I do flip these tacos halfway through the cooking process. You can see they got super crunchy on the bottom half. And I don't remember how long I cooked these for, probably 10 or 15 minutes at 425 degrees. And I let them cook until they got golden brown and crunchy on both sides. And then the way that I'm going to serve these up is tacos with the cilantro lime rice and the cilantro jalapeno dip that we made earlier and some homemade hot sauce. This was delicious. I have never made anything well, I've made the rice before, but I've never made crunchy tacos. But now I'm thinking a crunchy taco is just another name for a quesadilla. But in any case, they turned out delicious. I am trying a new recipe today for buttered chicken. I'm still looking for my favorite recipe, and I'm really excited about this one. This one has a lot of delicious spices in it, and it just sounds like the technique is going to make for a really delicious dinner. Probably should throw this in the food processor and really blend it up, but I'm just going to take a minute to really, really finely dice this ginger. We will be blending the curry in a bit after it's cooked, so it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, but I don't want really big chunks. I think that's probably good. I'm not sure if we're going to use all this ginger, but I wanted to get it chopped. If I don't use it all, I'll just freeze it, and then I'll have it chopped and ready to go next time I need it. I don't need to chop any other produce because we are going to use some of our homegrown garlic that I already have minced in the freezer and onions that I already have diced in the freezer. And the reason I wanted to do my ginger first is so that now I can do my chicken, and I can then throw my cutting board and my knife in the dishwasher. I have chicken thighs here. You can use chicken thighs or chicken breast, but I think what I'm gonna do, I haven't decided yet because it's only 10:30 in the morning. I'm getting this started pretty early in the day. I might actually throw this once it's fully cooked in my slow cooker to stay warm, and chicken thighs are less likely to dry out. And I forgot I need to actually cut these into bite-sized pieces, and I am taking the time to cut off any extra fatty bits just because those are not our favorite to bite into. But if you enjoy that part of the chicken and you don't want to cut that off, go ahead and skip that step. Just cut them into bite-sized pieces. And this recipe, which is really interesting, calls for a double marinade, which I have never done before on chicken. And it's one of the reasons I actually chose this recipe, because I thought that that was really intriguing. I have a bag in my freezer where anytime I cut off bits of chicken or beef, I go ahead and I throw it in a beef bag and in a chicken bag, whatever the bag needs to be. And then when I make chicken broth, I can throw that out and I can use that in chicken broth making. So I'm not going to waste that. Now what I should have done is cut my lemon in half, because for the first marinade, we are going to marinate it in lemon juice and just a couple of our spices. Now, if you didn't have time to do this, say you wanted to start this marinade before you go to work and you didn't have time to do both steps, this is my new lemon juicer and I love it. Then I'm sure you could just add all the marinade ingredients for both marinades, step 1 and step 2. And honestly, I'm sure it would taste delicious. But since I have a little extra time on this day, I'm gonna go ahead and do it the way the recipe says. But you know me, sometimes I make recipes my own. So that was salt, pepper, lemon juice, and paprika. This actually calls for a specific type of chili powder, but I don't have that chili powder, and it said you can substitute paprika. So that's what I'm doing. So this is the first step, the first marinade. This is gonna go in the refrigerator for 20 minutes. Then we'll pull it out and add the rest of the ingredients. It has now been probably more like 30 minutes since this has been marinating. So now we're gonna add the rest of our ingredients, which is garam masala, cumin. Actually, this is coriander. Cumin. And I do not have fenugreek leaves, so I'm going to substitute some homegrown parsley, Greek yogurt, and some olive oil. If I was in a hurry, I would just have added all of these ingredients at one time and not done this in a separate step. But because I have that time today, we're going to see how this turns out by doing the lemon marinade first and then the yogurt marinade. So it's now 11:30. I'm going to cover this back up and we will come back to this at dinner time. I almost forgot two of the most important ingredients, and that's some of our ginger and some garlic. We will add more ginger and more garlic when we actually make our sauce, but this definitely needs to be in with the chicken to marinate in with the chicken. Dinner is quickly approaching, which means I need to get going on the naan bread because this needs to rise for about an hour. So it is time to get going on that. First thing I'm going to do is weigh out two different types of whole grain. I have kamut here and a hard white wheat. I like to weigh out the grain when I'm working with fresh milled recipes if they give the weight, because you only really want to grind what you're going to use. And if I weigh it out in a whole berry form and then grind it, I know I have the right amount, versus if I just grind a random amount and then I use cups and measures, I might not grind enough or I might grind too much. So even if I don't use weight for the rest of the recipe, I've been finding it very useful to use the weight for the grains. Now this recipe called for kamut and hard white. This is the first time I'm using kamut. The recipe that I'm following, I can link down below for you. I have her cookbook. We're actually going to cook out of her cookbook twice this week, and she also has all of her recipes linked on her blog post, so I can link those for you as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my freshly milled flour and I'm going to mix that with the water and some honey, and I'm going to let that sit for about 15 minutes. One thing that I'm learning when it comes to working with fresh milled grains is that you want to let them sit and hydrate before you go and put all the ingredients in. So a lot of times fresh milled recipes will say, mix the flour in with the water and let it sit for 15 minutes. And that's what this recipe said to do. So while that was doing that, I went ahead and measured out the Greek yogurt we need and the oil, because there are a couple extra ingredients along with salt in this recipe that most breads don't have. So to our soaked grain, I'm going to add the yogurt and oil. It's going to look like it's not going to want to mix in, but it does eventually mix in. Now I'm going to mix in my rapid rise yeast and some baking powder. I'm pretty sure it's baking powder. I can't remember if it was baking powder or baking soda. And then we're going to let this rise for about an hour. So this is an interesting recipe because it has both yeast and a leavening agent. So that's now going to sit there. It kneaded for about 15-20 minutes actually. I let it rest for about an hour. I'm going to preheat my griddle to really hot, and we are going to take out our dough from our mixer and actually get this into the shape we want to cook it in. I first make it into a ball, And then I divide this into 8 equal pieces. When it comes to naan and tortillas and things like that, you can really make them as big or as little as you want. The recipe recommended 8. That's what I did, and that seemed like a good size. And I am using water here. This dough is pretty sticky. I have found that a lot of fresh milled recipes are pretty sticky, and that's because you want to make sure there's enough moisture in the dough so when they bake, they don't dry out. And this recipe says to use water to help prevent it sticking to your hands and to help prevent it sticking to your working surface versus using flour. We don't really want to incorporate more flour into this recipe, which I thought was really interesting. This is the first time I'm using water in this type of application. When I do stretch and folds for loaves, a lot of times I'll use water so the dough doesn't stick to my hands. But this was the first time I'd ever done it with naan. So now that I have my individual balls of my individual dough balls, I'm going to try to flatten these out to an even thickness and into a round shape. I don't do a perfect job getting these into a round shape, but nonetheless, they taste the same whether they are round or not. And I'm getting these pretty thin, and I'm using water to kind of, again, prevent stickage. This cast iron, actually this is not cast iron, this is a carbon steel griddle. It wasn't quite hot enough for these first couple ones, but as it sits and continues to warm up, by the time I cook the next couple, the griddle is pretty piping hot, and so you get those little bubbles that you want to see. They only take about 30 seconds or so per side. Once the griddle pan is heated up, this first batch probably took about 1.5 minutes each side because my griddle pan wasn't quite heated enough. And then I did want to check these just to make sure they were fully cooked. And then I'm going to put them on a plate. I'm going to brush them with some butter. And then I'm going to put a towel on them so they can steam just like I would if I was making tortillas. I'm just going to tell you now, we do a taste test, Josh comes, and these turned out incredible. We absolutely love them. They were soft, and they actually made really good peanut butter and jelly roll-ups. The ones that we didn't end up eating with dinner on this night, we used as just like bread because I didn't have any sandwich bread made up, and they were delicious. So now that I am working on the naan, it's closer to dinner time, so I'm going to start the sauce. And the nice thing about curry is you can kind of start it and let it simmer away, and it just gets better and better. So here I've got in my enamel cast iron some butter, and I have some chopped onions from last year's garden. This is a perfect application to save myself some time and use up last year's onions by not having to chop these onions here. And now I'm going to take our marinated chicken. I want to get this up to room temperature a little bit. So I am going to put this chicken on a cookie sheet or baking sheet, and I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees. And then I'm going to add a little bit of peppers to our onions. So this is made, Josh, with 100% fresh milled wheat. It's kamut, I think, and hard white wheat. I can't quite remember. They're pretty thin, but I think that's what's going to make it nice. Look how soft that is.
Kamut?
Kamut. It's a varietal of wheat. Now that looks pretty soft. Obviously we don't have it's still hot, our buttered chicken.
Oh, this with butter. Oh.
Yeah, that's what we're having for dinner tonight. Butter chicken.
Great texture.
Happy with that?
Nice and, I wouldn't say spongy.
Chewy.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I could clobber some of this for sure. Like a lot of it.
Wow.
How much do you have here?
I have 8 of them. You can take the rest of this one, but we probably should save
It's okay, we'll save it for dinner.
Okay.
Because I might need all 8. That's so good.
So good.
Perfect texture.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh decided to take the rest of that naan. Flatbreads are kind of Josh and I's favorite. Anything like a pita or naan or tortilla, we really, really, really like those things. And the fact that we were able to do 100% fresh milled, pretty exciting. My oven is still preheating. I'm getting my chicken up to room temperature a little bit so that it's not going into the oven refrigerator cold. I'm glad I added these peppers. These peppers from my garden are just so flavorful. And I'm not gonna add a green chili pepper to this because I don't want this to be spicy for my family because I'm the only one in my family that likes spicy things. So this is gonna add the pepper flavor, but no heat. I did want to mention also for my rice, I'm just cooking a long grain rice. If I was just having this, I probably would do a basmati rice, but I'm gonna take the leftover rice that we don't eat with the curry today and for lunch probably tomorrow or the next day. I'm gonna turn that into the rice that we're gonna need for our stuffed cabbage. So I just used a long grain, kind of more mild flavored rice. While this is cooking, I'm gonna get out all the spices I need to go into this. I want this to cook down and caramelize, so this is probably gonna take a good 8 or so minutes, maybe 10 or 15. That's gonna give me enough time to get all my spices out. I turned this down a little bit because I was paying attention to the spices, and I'm gonna make a little well in the center, and I'm gonna add some more butter because we're gonna bloom our spices in that butter. Most spice flavor compounds are fat soluble, so that's why we're gonna toast these spices in this fat. I have paprika, cumin, coriander, clove, cardamom, nutmeg, cinnamon, pepper, salt, and I think that's everything that's in here. The recipe originally says to use fresh whole cardamom, not fresh, but whole cardamom, whole clove, and whole cinnamon stick. Well, I have a cinnamon stick, but I don't have whole cardamom and I don't have whole clove, but I have ground. So we're gonna use that instead. Now I just put in all of my ginger and my garlic. I'm gonna saute that actually for a minute first before we add our spices. Oh my goodness, that already with that garlic and ginger smells incredible. And the onions and peppers. This is gonna come together relatively quickly now that I have all of my ingredients out. I'm gonna add my spices. I did not measure those fully, I just kind of guesstimated that. Saute that for a couple minutes, well, probably about a minute. I don't want to burn my spices, but I do want to toast them. Another thing this recipe says is to use fresh tomatoes. It is February, and I have a hard time buying fresh tomatoes when I have homegrown, home-jarred, fresh tomatoes right here. So that is what I'm going to use instead. So you hear that beautiful pop on there. This is just tomatoes crushed up. I'm going to put that in here. We are going to blend this sauce so that everything is smooth, but I'm going to let the tomatoes and the spices and the peppers all get to know each other in here before we do that. And I think I'm going to use a hand blender. I don't think I'm going to pull out my whole blender. And this is acidic because the tomatoes are acidic. I don't really want that splashing onto my griddle. So I'm just going to pull my griddle over here just so that my acidic tomatoes don't splash on that. I want these flavors to come together and really intensify, but I don't really want it to reduce too much. So I'm gonna put the lid on this and let this just simmer. I don't know if you're ever guilty while making dinner to walk away and get distracted and forget what you're doing. Well, I just did that. And we almost had a disaster on our hands, but we did. The tomato sauce mixture almost burnt, but I saved it. It scorched a little bit. I was able to pour off the top part that is nice and not scorched. And I'm gonna put this in my pot here because I'm gonna actually blend this with a stick blender in just a second. I figured it'll be easier to do that in this pot, and our chicken is almost done, and then everything will fit in one pot. So nothing's burnt or ruined or anything like that. This has come together and thickened up nicely. We are going to thin this out with some cream, but before I add the cream, so our chicken is beautifully brown. That's what I wanted, to get some nice, beautiful color, because obviously I'm not cooking that in a tandoori oven. I probably should have put a piece of parchment paper down, but These pans do clean up relatively nicely, and they have some beautiful color on the chicken now. I'm gonna get this in my pot, and then I'm gonna get this cookie sheet or baking sheet in some water to soak off some of that cooked on bits. The cool thing about this recipe that I'm following today, it gives you directions on to make homemade cashew milk or cream if you want to do that. But I'm just going to use good old heavy cream. If you left the chicken out and you used the cashew cream, you could make this into a vegan dinner. Okay, so now everything's together. The chicken is fully cooked. I did check its internal temperature. I'm gonna give this a taste test real quick, and then I'm gonna put it on as low as my stove will go, because we're not quite ready to eat dinner yet, and it doesn't hurt for this just to simmer and get to know each other. Depending on how acidic my tomatoes are, sometimes when I make butter chicken, I do add maybe a tablespoon of brown sugar, but sometimes you don't have to do that because the cream adds some sweetness to it. And this makes a beautiful make-ahead freezer meal too. You can make it just the sauce and freeze the sauce and don't add chicken. You can add the chicken and freeze it, and it thaws beautifully. We're almost there. It does need a good amount of salt because it's kind of, I can taste it, but I can tell that it doesn't have enough salt yet. I went ahead and I just added the rest of that cream because I didn't really feel like putting it back in the fridge. And we're gonna give this a taste test one more time. Okay, that is perfect. It does feel like it needs to simmer and kind of come together, but I don't think it needs any level of sweetness. I don't think it needs any more salt. So I'm just gonna put this lid on kind of halfway, let some of it steam off, and just kind of let all those flavors marry. Our naan is done, our rice is done. We're just gonna let this simmer till we sit down and eat dinner. This was so warm and comforting and delicious. It was actually better when I was having it for lunch the following couple days. Just something about it sitting there and the flavors marinating and just so yummy. This next recipe we're gonna be trying is a chili cornbread casserole. I know I've had chili cornbread casserole because I remember my mom making this when we were growing up a few times, but I have never made it myself. So what we're gonna do is make a homemade chili, and then we're gonna make a homemade cornbread to go on the top. And we're gonna make basically a one and done dish that is gonna be, I think, delicious, because I really like all the flavors going into this. And this is one that I've been really looking forward to making. So I have 1 pound of lean ground beef cooking on the stove. While that's browning, we're gonna do the only veggie prep we have to do for this recipe, which is chop or dice 1 onion. This is a Walla Walla sweet onion from my garden, and I think this is gonna add incredibly delicious flavor to this recipe. While our ground beef is cooking, let's go ahead and make our homemade cornbread to go on the top of this. And this cornbread looks really good and really easy. If you don't want to make your own cornbread and you want to make this even easier, you could just make the chili portion of this recipe and use a box of your favorite cornbread mix and put it on top of this chili. But we're going to go ahead and make our own because this recipe looks pretty easy to throw together. We're going to start with 1 cup cornmeal, 1 cup all-purpose flour, baking soda, baking powder, salt, sugar. We like sweet cornbread around here. Now I know sweet versus savory cornbread is can be a very controversial topic. So you can omit the sugar, I'm sure, if you prefer a more savory cornbread. But this cornbread recipe only has 1 or 2 tablespoons of sugar in it versus the cornbread recipe I grew up with, the one that my mom makes and the one that I really like, has, I think, 2/3 cup of sugar in it. Now that's for a 9x13 pan of cornbread, but I think it's so delicious. So let me know, are you team sweet or not sweet cornbread. I know it's pretty regional whether you prefer a sweet or a more savory cornbread. This recipe does not call for any peppers, but when I make chili, I typically add peppers to my cornbread, and I harvested some peppers out of my garden yesterday, or actually I should say my son did. He picked all of them. So I think because we're gonna have time while these onions are sauteing, I'm gonna get some peppers chopped up because I think that'll add some good flavor. But I do wanna finish my cornbread. To do that, I'm gonna melt 6 tablespoons of butter. I'm for the most part following this recipe, except for the fact that I'm adding some of these really beautiful, teeny tiny snack bell peppers, which I actually have washed already, and I put them in the fridge. So I'm just gonna get some of these chopped up. I don't think I'm gonna grow this variety of pepper next year because they're kind of tedious to cut around. This was a new variety I got. They're called a snacking pepper because they're so teeny tiny. They taste good, but we're not really, oh, my butter is ready. We're not really a snacky pepper family. I like mostly to use peppers cooked. So I have been just chopping these and sauteing them. And because these ones are a little bit on the tedious side, I don't think I'm gonna grow them again. But they've been fun. They were fun for my son to pick off the green stalk a couple days ago. I can smell that beef. Give it a little bit of a stir. This is pretty lean ground beef, so I'm not gonna have to drain it at all. I'm actually gonna turn this down now. And while I continue to chop up my peppers, I am gonna get my onions in there because that pan is telling me it's ready. There's still a little pink on some of those pieces, but that ground beef will finish cooking once or while the onions are cooking. I have not seasoned this ground beef at all yet, so let's get a little bit of salt on it. That'll help sweat the onions and it'll help deglaze the bottom of the pan. I just had a thought. Something the recipe does not call for that would be delicious in this. Before I mix this all the way up, I'm gonna grate some white, sharp cheddar cheese into that, and I think that will be delicious. If you're new to my kitchen, welcome. I use recipes generally as a guide. The recipe at the end says you can serve this with fresh jalapenos, cheese, and sour cream, green onions, and things like that. But I think it would be good to add some cheese right into the cornbread because I love a jalapeno cheddar cornbread. You could also probably add some jalapenos chopped right into that cornbread as well if you wanted to. But I know my family would prefer me not to add the jalapenos into the cornbread because they don't like spicy. But I will definitely be chopping up some fresh jalapenos to add on top of our chili cornbread casserole. Oh yeah, that is gonna be good. And you know what that's gonna do too? That's gonna add a beautiful brown color to our casserole. And this is a nice cornbread consistency. Cornbread you don't wanna overmix. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. I love cornbread. That smells so good. I haven't made cornbread, I don't think, since last fall or winter. Peppers and onions are looking nice and sauteed. So I'm gonna add some frozen garlic to this. That'll take just a minute to thaw and saute. And while that's thawing and sauteing, I'm gonna add my seasonings. I already salted it, so we're gonna add some black pepper, cumin, chili powder, and typically when I add fresh garlic and onions to something, I still will add some dried garlic powder. This is actually some roasted dried garlic powder, and I'm gonna add some freeze-dried onions because I like the flavor of both fresh and dried. Now the garlic that I put in there was frozen, but it was basically fresh garlic that I minced up and made into those little pucks that you saw and froze. Because I love fresh garlic, but I don't like peeling and chopping fresh garlic every time I need it. So I have found that if I take some time, I either buy fresh garlic in a pack, you can get it in a 2-pound pack at either Sam's Club or Costco, wash it, blitz it up, you can freeze that fresh in little pucks, or you can take the time to peel garlic. When I pull garlic out of my garden, I take the time to peel it. When I'm out of the garlic from my garden, then I do buy that fresh garlic in the fresh section of my grocery store. A lot of flavor compounds in spices are fat soluble, so I like to toast them up in some oil in the pan. I did add the last 2 tablespoons of butter that we didn't use for the cornbread in here because this beef was so lean. I thought that it could do with a little bit of butter with the sauteing of the onions and peppers, and then now the spices. And now that's cooked for a little bit, we're gonna add our crushed tomatoes. I just added frozen corn. Now I'm gonna add 1 can of black beans. So this is kind of cool. These black beans are beans that I grew in my garden. The tomatoes I grew in my garden, and the onions and peppers I grew in my garden. So it's kind of fun. And here is our chili base. We're gonna mix this up. I'm gonna let this simmer for just a bit to kind of let all those flavors come together. Yes, I'm glad I added the peppers to this. I think we would have missed that if I had not added that. And I wanna get this nice and hot. I did not drain the beans and I did not drain the corn. I think that moisture in there will add to kind of a nice saucy texture to our chili. While that's simmering away, I'm gonna take a second to clean up. One thing to note, I am all out of plain crushed tomatoes that I put up from tomatoes I grew in my garden. So what I did, instead of buying crushed tomatoes, because I have tomatoes downstairs in my pantry, I took 2 jars of diced tomatoes. I drained them, they were pints, and then I blitzed them in the blender and I just put them in here. But the only pints or the only type of tomato products I have downstairs from tomatoes I put up from my garden from last year are diced tomatoes and marinara sauce. And I did not want to use marinara sauce in this, so I figured just crushing up my own diced tomatoes would be a good substitute. Last year, I didn't put up any plain crushed tomatoes because I had some from the previous year. So this coming year, I have about probably 75 pounds of tomatoes on my dining room table, and I probably have about 150 pounds of tomatoes in my freezer that I grew in my garden, that when I go to process those with you all, I'm gonna process not just marinara sauce like I did last year, but I'm gonna go ahead and process some crushed tomatoes as well. I processed, I guess last year, marinara sauce and diced tomatoes, but this year I don't need to process any diced tomatoes because I have still plenty of those. I thought I would just show you the tomatoes on my table right now. That's some zucchini too that I need to process as well. If you're new and you are interested in knowing how to can your own tomato products, you do not have to be a gardener in order to do this. Before I had my own garden for about 4 years, I was buying tomatoes from a local farmer and processing them myself and canning them up. Now I have my own garden, so I use my own tomatoes. But if that's something you're interested in, consider subscribing, because in a couple weeks, we will be processing all those tomatoes plus the couple 100 pounds of tomatoes that are in my freezer. Now, one of the most important aspects of this is we're gonna taste it, because we can adjust the seasonings now, but it's gonna be hard to adjust the seasonings once we bake it. While I'm waiting for this to cool off, I was thinking, if you don't like black beans, but you like kidney beans, swap out kidney beans for black beans. If you don't like corn, go ahead and add 2 cans of beans and leave out the corn. If you don't like beans in your chili, add 2 pounds of ground beef and skip the beans. Wow. I don't think that needs any seasoning adjustments. Perfect on the salt, perfect on the spices. Nice and garlicky. I'm gonna go ahead and get this turned off. And this is a pretty thick batter. I was thinking I was gonna pour this on, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that. So I'm just gonna take this small cookie scoop and scoop the cornbread batter on the top. By having the chili really hot on the bottom, that's gonna help make sure that the bottom of this cornbread gets cooked evenly with the top of the cornbread. If you were to prep the chili portion ahead of time, say you wanted to bake it when you got home from work, I would throw the chili portion in the oven. Make sure you get that chili portion super bubbly in the oven, and then top it with your cornbread. But this did not take very long to put together at all. I just know from making things like chicken pot pie with biscuits on the top, if the filling is cold and you put the biscuits on, the bottom of the biscuits won't get cooked by the time the top part of the biscuit is done. Okay, beautiful. So I'm gonna kind of spread out this cornbread mixture just a little bit. And I purposely chose to make this chili in my baking pan. This is a braiser pan that I can go from the stove directly into the oven because this is saving me a dish. I probably should have opened the oven door before I brought this over here. And at this point, all we have to do is wait for that cornbread to bake, which the recipe says should take about 28 to 35 minutes, and you want it slightly golden brown. So I will set a timer and we will be eating dinner shortly. Definitely in that amount of time, I will be able to clean up my little bit of dishes that I haven't been able to clean up yet so far. I love this type of dinner. It may have created quite a few dishes. I may have been able to get away with a few less dishes, but I like a dinner like this that the veggie, the protein, and the starch are all built into one, because then I don't always feel the need to have a side. I mean, of course, you could definitely with this have a side salad or some fruit or something like that, but if you didn't feel the need to do that, I wouldn't always feel the need to do that. If I didn't have the energy, if I just kind of wanted to get dinner in the oven, get the kitchen cleaned up, and then call it done. The only other thing I'm gonna do to serve with that dinner is I am going to slice up some jalapeno and pull out some sour cream. And I will serve up some hot sauce for myself. One thing to note about this is it has bubbled over just a little bit. So if I was to make this again in this pan, I would put it on a baking sheet. It didn't boil over too bad, but it definitely, that's done. It definitely has a little bit on the bottom of my oven that I am going to get the pleasure of cleaning off. But this looks so good. I'm gonna let that cool for probably about 10-15 minutes or so before we dish it up and give it a taste test. I'm gonna have Josh come down and we're gonna give it a taste test together. I actually have a serrano pepper here, which will be delicious. And Josh is here, he's gonna do a taste test with us.
Hello.
You know what this is? Did I tell you what I was making?
No, but it kind of looks like the biscuit pot pie.
Chili cornbread.
Oh.
Okay, the cornbread is fully cooked. So we have a chili base, Josh, with a cheddar cornbread topping. And do you want some sour cream?
Sure.
Do you want serrano peppers?
Are they spicy?
Yeah.
Probably not.
There you go.
I do love the idea of having a homegrown serrano pepper, but I feel like the spiciness probably might ruin it for me.
Probably. Let me get you a spoon.
Okay.
I definitely want some sour cream on here. And I'm gonna try it without the serrano pepper so I can get the full taste of it.
It smells really good.
Now, I have never made anything like this for Josh before. I mean, I've made chili and I've made cornbread. I've never made a chili cornbread bake.
Yeah, true.
And whenever I make chili, I do have to have cornbread with it because that's just my favorite combination. It's hot.
Very hot. It's really good though. You got a good amount of corn in the chili too, which is good.
And that's the corn we put up this year together.
That's really good.
You like it?
Yeah, great balance. The chili on its own is good.
Okay.
The cornbread's good on its own.
So you tried just the chili by itself and you tried just the cornbread by itself?
Yep.
Do you think you like this better than chili and cornbread?
I think so because it makes it not a soup.
Yeah.
I'm not really a soup guy.
Josh, yeah, is not a soup guy. If you've been here around here before, he's not a soup guy. He'll eat it the night of, but he doesn't enjoy having it for like lunches and things like that.
It's hard to get warm. I don't know. It splashes.
In the microwave?
Yeah.
This is really good.
It is really good.
I would definitely make this again. This next recipe is a Mississippi pot roast. I have never made or had a Mississippi pot roast before. So I thought, hey, we're doing slow cooker dinners. Let's finally give this a try because I love a pot roast in the slow cooker. So here are our ingredients. We have a chuck roast, salt and pepper, beef broth, ranch seasoning powder, butter, and pepperoncinis. The first thing I'm going to do is get my potatoes scrubbed up. These are some homegrown potatoes and they are dirty. I'm actually not going to peel these potatoes because I was able to scrub them well enough. Well, maybe I do peel them. I can't remember now. I didn't think I was going to, but maybe I end up peeling them. But this is definitely a dump and go recipe. Now, one thing I don't keep on hand that is in Mississippi pot roast is I don't keep a gravy packet on hand. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to make a gravy packet using some homemade beef broth. But the first thing I'm going to do is add some ranch powder to our slow cooker along with our potatoes. So I did not peel them, but what I did do is cut the green parts off. These are some homegrown potatoes, and if potatoes have access to sunlight, they will turn green. The green is actually just chlorophyll. That green part's not going to hurt you, but the green part indicates that there could be something in a potato that can make you have an upset stomach. So it is best if you see green on potatoes just to cut that off. So I went ahead and cut the green parts off, and then I put the rest of the potatoes in with our chuck roast and our ranch powder mix. I'm going to add some sliced pepperoncinis to this with our pepperoni juice, and then we're going to make our homemade beef gravy base. Basically, I have a pint of beef broth here. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of flour. I'm going to shake that up. I'm going to pour that on top of our roast, and that right there is going to be our substitution for a beef gravy. I'm kind of making a mess. For a beef gravy packet. So I'm going to pour that in here. Basically, the flour is going to thicken up the juices that the beef is going to create, and obviously the broth that I added. I thought I would add just a little bit more ranch powder to the actual potatoes themselves. I'm going to season this with some salt and pepper, and that's basically it, along with some butter. We do end up putting some butter on here, and I do end up putting some garlic on here. The recipe does not call for garlic, but how can I cook something like this without garlic? So I'm going to add some garlic. I don't think you actually see me add the puck of garlic, but I do add that. And this is so easy. I have never made this before. Like I said, I've seen this going around online for years, and I am here to tell you we absolutely loved it. I got this going really early in the morning. Beef chuck roast take hours to cook, and look at these potatoes. My favorite way to eat potatoes is when they're cooked in some sort of broth, or when they're cooked with a protein like chicken or beef, and the drippings from the beef or the chicken make its way into the potatoes. I just absolutely love it. And then these potatoes were sitting up against the side of the slow cooker, so they kind of got caramelized on the side, and they were so good. I don't remember what I was doing on this day. This was a busy day as well. I think it was a garden day. I can't remember. But all I remember is that all we had on this day was the roast beef and the potatoes. I did not end up making a side, which was fine. This was delicious in and of itself. But because this is a chuck roast, there is quite a bit of fat pieces and there's a bone in there. Whenever I make a chuck roast or a roast of any kind, I do like to pull the meat out of the slow cooker, let it cool just a little bit so I can handle it, and I like to remove any fatty bits and any bits that we do not want to eat. So that's what I'm doing. But I want to show you here, even though we did not add a packet of gravy mix, this broth is still relatively thick and has a beautiful silkiness to it. But because I want it to be a little bit thicker, I'm going to show you how I'm going to turn this broth into more of what one would consider a gravy. So the first thing I'm going to do is strain out my broth and juice from the slow cooker into my fat separator. I've never done this before, but this was a new experiment to me. I have my slow cooker on high, and I'm adding flour directly to the bottom of my slow cooker along with some of the fat that we strained off the broth. And I thought, why couldn't I just make a quick little roux using the heat from my slow cooker? First time trying this. This was not in the original recipe. This turned out perfect. I will probably do it this way from here on out. Normally, when I make a gravy using the drippings from a roast in a slow cooker, I pull out a pan and I do this on the stove. But I don't think I will ever do that again, because if you have your slow cooker on high, it worked totally fine to do this on the base of my slow cooker. This is not a slow cooker that has a saute setting. This was just using the residual heat from this slow cooker being on all day. Plus I have this plugged into my island and I have this cooking away, and we were able to make a beautiful thick gravy right in the base of our slow cooker. This was dinner: potatoes, roast beef, and gravy on this night. It was hearty, it was delicious, it was incredibly easy. The hardest part of this dinner was scrubbing the potatoes and pulling the fat and kind of gristly bits off the roast. But look how beautiful this is. I was not sure if Josh was going to like this because the vinegariness from the pepperoncinis, but he loved this. I did end up putting a dollop of sour cream on my potatoes, but Josh just had potatoes, roast beef, and gravy. It was delicious. The way we ended up using the leftovers is I ended up making some beef and cheese quesadillas using the shredded beef that we didn't end up eating on this night. So it was really nice kind of having some pre-shredded beef for turning into a different dish, so we didn't feel like we were eating the same thing over and over. And then we didn't eat all these potatoes on this original night, and so I ended up taking those potatoes that we didn't eat the following day, chopping them up, cooking up some eggs, and we kind of had a hash. So that's one fun thing about this dinner, is that we were able to have a really delicious, cozy fall roast dinner, but then I was able to take the leftovers and turn them into something different that was just as delicious, but didn't take any time the following day to make. And for tomorrow night's dinner, we are going to make, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I will obviously link this recipe down in the description box for you. And this recipe says to, if you can, cut up your chicken the day before and marinate it, but that you don't have to do that. It just tastes better if you do. Since I have a second here, I'm gonna go ahead and follow the directions there. And I'm going to cut the chicken, put it in the dish we're gonna bake tomorrow night's dinner in, and we're gonna marinate the chicken in the dish we're gonna bake so that we get one less dish dirty. I have 2 large chicken breasts here. This is basically a chicken and rice dish. These are huge. I'm gonna get a paper towel and pat them dry. Not necessary because we are not gonna be searing this chicken, but just easier to work with it. These chicken breasts are so big. I'm gonna cut them in half. And then I'm gonna cut them into cubes. You could use chicken thighs for this as well. Whatever you prefer. I prefer chicken breast in a recipe like this where you're not really grilling or getting a good char on the chicken. I prefer chicken breast when I grill, and when I bake things like this, I prefer chicken breast. And I just remembered I'm supposed to chop up an onion, and I probably should have done that first before I chopped up this chicken, but oh well. This recipe calls for Campari tomatoes chopped, or Campari tomatoes chopped. I don't know what those are, so let me go do a quick Google search, and I'm trying to figure out, oh, it also calls for a spice that I don't know what it is. I've never heard of it before, which is the name of this chicken dish. So let me go Google, I do have date syrup. I'm gonna go Google that spice to see if it's a blend of different spices that I have on hand. And if I don't have it, what I can use as a substitution. So I'll be right back. Good news, that spice is a spice blend, and all of the spices that are in that blend are spices that I have on hand. And the Campari tomatoes are basically like a really large cherry tomato. Well, I have a few tomatoes left coming out of my garden. Well, they technically have been out of my garden for about 2 weeks, but they've been ripening on a table over there. And I'm gonna go ahead and just cut these up and put them in here. I'm also gonna cut up some shallots. This recipe calls for shallots. And then I am going to just take all the spices out that are in that spice blend. These tomatoes could ripen a little bit more, but this is what I have, so this is what we're gonna use. It'll add some nice acidity to it, this dish, I'm assuming, because we're gonna add a ton of really warm spices. I think I was saying something. Did I interrupt myself? And now I can't remember what I was saying. Basically, I have all the ingredients I need for this spice blend. Normally, I don't put tomatoes in my fridge, but because this is gonna be cooked down anyway, I don't think it'll be a problem that I am gonna be refrigerating these tomatoes for just a little bit. And if you didn't have fresh tomatoes, if I didn't have these fresh tomatoes, you could probably just pull out a can of diced tomatoes, and that would work too. So I think I want to leave these shallots in kind of like longer stick shape, just just to add a little bit of a different texture. I'm not exactly sure what the recipe at this point says to do with these shallots, but let's get some space on this cutting board. And these are some strong, spicy shallots. Woo! I should have put something down underneath this cutting board too, but this is the last thing I need to cut, so we're just gonna go with it. Okay. Get that in there. Now the hardest part about this dish is going to be to get out all the spices, but it's not going to take very long. So let me grab out all the spices we need. This has a lot of really yummy warm spices, so this feels like it would be really good for this time of year in the fall because we have cinnamon, cumin, sweet paprika, coriander, allspice, clove, nutmeg, and cardamom, along with one of my favorite spices that I don't use that often, and I gotta find it, sumac. Now, I'm not gonna really measure anything because the recipe that I'm looking at calls for making a big quantity. So what I'm gonna do is look at this spice blend recipe, and I am going to just kind of look at the ratios and go for that. So the biggest spice component to this is cinnamon. So I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do so that if I ever wanna recreate this, I can do it. So I'm gonna do 1 teaspoon cinnamon. And then the next biggest one is black peppercorns or black pepper. So I'm gonna do a heaping teaspoon of black pepper. I'm gonna do a heaping teaspoon of salt. Maybe 2 teaspoons of salt because that was a lot of chicken, and we're gonna add a lot of rice to this as well. I'm gonna put my spices over there once I use them. This smells good already. I love these warm spices in savory dishes. It's something that I'm relatively kind of new to. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of coriander, a heaping, let's see. Let's do 1 teaspoon of paprika. That's sweet paprika. And then these sweeter, more, that's cardamom. Spices, we're not gonna put quite as much. I'm gonna do 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom. Nutmeg, I have to grind. I'm gonna do 1/8 of a teaspoon of clove. I could have probably mixed these all into a dish and then put them in here, but this is gonna work. I'm gonna do 1/4 teaspoon allspice and probably just about a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. And then the last spice is going to be sumac. If you've never cooked with sumac, it is so good. I'm gonna do 1/3 of a teaspoon of sumac. It's very, very citrusy, and it's delicious. Okay, I have a pile of dishes over there that I'm accumulating. I can get these spices put away right in here. My winter goal is to go through all my drawers and cupboards, and they all need a good deep clean, and they all need to be organized. But that's a project for another day. Okay, so I have pomegranate molasses here, and we are gonna add a few more ingredients to our chicken. I've got some spices here that when I pulled the spices out of the drawer, they ended up on my counter. And I had to order this on Amazon I can find pomegranate syrup in my grocery store, like a fancy or higher end grocery store, but I cannot find this pomegranate molasses or date syrup. Wait, this is pomegranate molasses. This is so funny. So the last few recipes that have called for pomegranate molasses, I've used date syrup. And now I don't have any date syrup because I can find that at my grocery store. And I have pomegranate molasses that I bought on Amazon. That's so funny. So this recipe actually calls for date syrup. And I was just at the grocery store where I could have bought date syrup, but this is what I thought I needed. This is what I have. So I'm gonna use this. They taste pretty similar. This is a little bit more tart. So I'm gonna add a tablespoon of brown sugar because this is definitely a little bit more tart than date syrup. That's so funny. That's how it goes though. This is a real kitchen. You and I are just in my kitchen cooking. So I'm gonna probably add it's probably like 2 compacted tablespoons of dark brown sugar. And that'll work as a substitute. And let's see what else we could add to this. Anything else we need? Yes, we need more stuff. We need garlic powder. And then I already added the salt and pepper I want for this recipe. So I don't need to add any more of that. We are gonna add some tomato sauce. Now this recipe calls for just plain tomato sauce. Josh and I did a taste test of marinara sauces, and I have quite a few marinara sauces that need to be used up. I gave a bunch away to some friends and family because I think we did 9 taste tests and we couldn't go through 9. And so I'm just gonna substitute a little bit of marinara sauce, and I think that should be fine. And I'm gonna add some olive oil. And that is basically it. So we have 2 more ingredients we need to add to this, but it's the rice. We're gonna cook the rice in the oven with this chicken, and I don't wanna add that now. So the only thing I'll have to do for tomorrow night's dinner, and I will show you what that looks like when we get to it, but we will add 2 cups of rinsed basmati rice and 4 cups of boiling water, it says. But this already smells really, really good. And then you can serve this with whatever kind of vegetable you would like on the side. But the idea is that you cook the chicken and the rice together, and just so easy. So this is where the recipe said if you want, you can go ahead and just add your rice right now in your boiling water and throw this in the oven. But if you can prep this the day before, the chicken will have time to marinate, and it'll be just that much more delicious. Now I'm gonna go grab a piece of foil. I'm gonna pop this in the fridge. This will be the same foil we use tomorrow when we cook our chicken and rice. So this is the chicken that we marinated. I put foil on it. I threw it in the freezer. I just pulled it out. I'm gonna let it thaw. We're gonna go down, do a big organizational project, and then when we're done, or when we're almost done, and we're hungry for dinner, I will come up, we'll make a yogurt sauce to go with this. We'll add our rice, we'll add our broth, which reminds me, I need to get broth out of the freezer because I am out of it jarred downstairs. Here is some homemade chicken stock that we will let thaw while our chicken thaws. So I'm really glad that I took the time to prep this because now we can focus on this big organizational project and I don't have to worry about dinner. So I'll see you back when we make dinner tonight. Well, let me just tell you, I am very grateful that I have had time earlier to prep most of tonight's dinner because we have been working downstairs all day and I'm just taking a little break from downstairs so I can come up here and get dinner in the oven. I was thinking that we were supposed to cook the rice and the chicken in chicken broth, but then I was rereading my recipe and the recipe actually says water, boiling water, which I could do. I could just put a kettle on and boil some water, but I've already thawed this chicken broth and I think it'll just add a little extra protein, a little extra flavor to use up this chicken broth. You do not have to do this step according to the recipe. If you wanted to skip this step, put your kettle on this will boil faster anyway. This is not quite 4 cups, so I will use whatever this chicken broth is, plus I will also add water. This is some of the best chicken broth I've ever made in a while, so might as well use it. It's delicious. 420 degrees. That's what we're supposed to cook this at. And I'm gonna go ahead and get my yogurt sauce made up in my Vitamix. I just brought up, this is some freeze-dried liver for the dogs because they're completely out of dog treats up here. But I also grabbed some freeze-dried onions because I'm out of my onion powder and freeze-dried cilantro from last year's garden. I don't have any fresh cilantro in my house or green onions or anything because I haven't gone grocery shopping or anything like that. So we're just gonna use that and we're just gonna make up a yogurt sauce. You can use yogurt, you can use sour cream. I might use a little bit of both because I think I'm almost out of yogurt. If I had a fresh jalapeno, I would add that into this. That would be so good. I love keeping a yogurt or like an herby green sauce on hand. It's kind of become my new go-to, especially since I've been trying to keep my blood sugar down a little bit and I'm eating a lot of protein and veggies. Having a really yummy herb sauce to go on everything has been really nice. I make it a little different every time, just whatever I have on hand. I've been really liking, this is probably my new favorite go-to yogurt. It's the Kirkland Organic Greek yogurt, non-fat. It's just delicious. It's got a little bit of sourness to it, but it's not crazy sour. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of sour cream just because I wanna make a little bit more than the yogurt I have here. I'm gonna add some freeze-dried onions. If I don't have any onion powder, might as well. I should have blended up my onions for my onion powder before making this, but I didn't. Some freeze-dried cilantro. This is the last of the freeze-dried cilantro I grew in last year's garden. This year's garden, my cilantro didn't do anything. So I'm glad I had a lot from last year. Let's see what else I have over here. Let's add some garlic. My broth is up to a boil. I'm gonna add some cumin. No, this is coriander. We'll add a little cumin because those spices are in this dish. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break from this. This broth is so good. I'm gonna add 2. We need 4 cups total, so I'll just top that with really hot tap water. My water can come out of my tap extremely hot. Oh my goodness, that heat of that broth, touching those spices, I can smell the chicken broth and I can smell all those spices. It smells incredible. I'm gonna stir this up just a little bit so the rice is kind of evenly distributed throughout this whole dish. I was thinking you could probably, if I make this again, I would do 1 cup of rice and 1 whole packet of cauliflower rice, but I'm making it according to the directions this first time. Now what she says to do is cover with a piece of parchment paper and then cover with foil. We want to trap in all that steam. Into the oven this goes. Not sure how long this is supposed to cook for. I'm assuming a good 50 minutes. Let me take a look. My recipe's over here. Bake in the preheated oven at 420 for 45 minutes. Remove the cover, bake for an additional 10 minutes. Transfer the oven to broil or 450 and broil for 5 to 7 minutes until you have a nice golden crust. Garnish with Maldon flaky salt and chopped parsley. I think in her video though, that's where she said, because I got this from Instagram, she said that it's good to serve with a yogurt herb sauce. So that's where I'm getting that idea. So that's what we're gonna do. We lost power today for a second, so it says it's 2:31. I have no idea what time it is. I think it's like 5:15 right now at this point. So let's finish our sauce. And what I did for this recipe, because this was a recipe that I found on Instagram, and it did not have, I couldn't find a blog post. Sometimes when I find recipes on Instagram, I can find that person's blog, and then I can print the recipe from their blog. Sometimes I can't find a blog. They just have the recipe written in the comment section of the video. So what I do is I go to Instagram on my computer, I copy and paste the recipe, I paste that into a note, and then I print the note. So if you're ever wondering how to print a recipe from just an Instagram post, or I'm sure TikTok, you could probably do the same thing. You can do it that way. This would be really good with some pickled red onions too, I think. I have pickled banana peppers, so we'll use those instead. I don't have any pickled red onions, but if I did, that would be good too. Now because I use freeze-dried onions, this is gonna be a nice and thick sauce, even though we used yogurt, and yogurt tends to be a little bit thinner than, say, a sour cream based. I just splashed that on my cheek. Let me wipe that off. I'm definitely getting hungry at this point. I think I got the yogurt off my face. That's good. That'll only get better as it sits for a few minutes and the onion hydrates and the cilantro hydrates, but I don't think I'm gonna add anything to that. Like I said, if I had a jalapeno, I would throw that in here too. I have a bunch of frozen jalapenos that was gonna turn into some hot sauce, which I probably still will do. But I think I might throw some of my hot peppers into the freeze dryer and turn them into a powder that I could add into something like this. So my Greek yogurt's done. I'm gonna get this in a dish. That's gonna bake. Let me set a timer and I'll see you back when we take the foil off. I've been downstairs working with Josh. I just came up here and it smells like the best curry ever. Oh my goodness, it smells good. So if the texture and taste is anything like the smell, we're in for a really good dinner tonight. There's still definitely some liquid in there. Looks like the rice is probably pretty cooked. Oh my goodness, my friend, it smells so good. So I'm gonna close this. This with peas in it would be really good. I'm gonna turn this up. Let's see. I'm gonna do 450 for about 10 minutes. And I'm gonna set a timer, and I'm gonna head back downstairs. We are almost done getting downstairs cleaned up. Huge project. Some of the stuff that I moved that was downstairs is now in our living room. That'll be a tomorrow project where I then need to go through that stuff, get that stuff put away. But downstairs should be cleaned by the time we are ready to eat dinner. I just set a timer for 15 minutes. Oh my goodness. I think putting it on broil was absolutely the right, or not broil, but I put it on 450. Look how nice and caramelized that is. This is gonna be a little hard to scrub, but I think it's gonna be worth it. Let me get this over here. Ooh, it's heavy. I'm gonna do a taste test with you right now. I will let you know Josh's thoughts on this dinner after he tastes it, after we sit down to enjoy it together as a family. I just wanna dish this out to show you what it looks like. So the rice looks nice and fluffy. There's no excess liquid in here at all. It looks like there's the perfect amount of moisture to rice ratio. I like how this got charred here. Josh is finishing up a big cleaning project that we've been working on all day. So I thought I would give this a taste test while it's perfectly hot, and then we'll sit down to dinner and enjoy it. And then I can give you what Josh's opinion on this dish is. So hot. If it smells anything like it tastes, this is gonna be incredible. Because I've been going downstairs in between the cooking, I then come up here and I've had our door shut between our living room and our kitchen, and I open that door and it's like, oh my goodness, it smells so good in here. I'm gonna try the chicken first. with a little bit of the yogurt. Maybe I should try it without the yogurt sauce first, just to taste what the chicken tastes like. Oh, and I've got the onions too, or the shallots. I almost forgot what I did because I did it like 4 days ago. That has such good flavor. Now I'm gonna try the chicken with the yogurt sauce. Has the perfect level of sweetness. Now I'm gonna try a bite with everything. The rice, the chicken, the tomato, a little bit of that shallot. That's a big bite. Oh my goodness. This is a dish I will absolutely be making again. Now I did do one substitution, I believe. I used pomegranate molasses instead of date syrup, and I added a little bit of sugar to it. This is so good. Oh my goodness. I haven't been eating very much rice, and so this is a little bit of a treat to eat this rice. The chicken is perfectly tender. There's a good amount of seasoning, like spice flavor, but it is not spicy to me at all. I think my family will like the level of spice. When I say spice, I mean like smoked paprika and all of those warm clove and allspice. It's not spicy to me at all. I will doctor mine up and make mine very spicy because I think this, if you like spicy, would be really good with hot sauce. Oh, I forgot I was gonna put some pickled peppers on it. That'll be good. My cowboy serrano peppers on this would be good. My dehydrated serrano peppers in oil would be good on this. Just red pepper flakes would be good on this. I am going to heat up some cauliflower rice, and I will eat the chicken mostly on cauliflower rice for myself, but my family will eat this rice. Josh is outside. I want him to do a taste test with you because this is so good. I want to hear his thoughts on it. I dished some up for Josh. He doesn't love yogurt sauce as much as I do, so I just put a little in the center and he can eat around it if he doesn't want to eat it. This is so good. So good. The next recipe we're going to be making is cracked corn, and we are going to start with our frozen corn that I thawed. We do need to chop up some herbs, but since I've already pre-shredded my cheddar cheese, I'm just going to add my cheddar cheese to this. Next, I'm going to open a can of diced green chilies, and you can choose whichever heatness you want on this. The last recipe called to drain those chilies. I don't drain them for this dip. I just add them in straight like that. Now I'm gonna chop one jalapeno. I'm gonna set my dip over here. And again, I think I'm gonna go ahead and just leave the seeds in, because why not? Jalapenos are funny like that. Sometimes they have no heat to them at all and they're sweet as a bell pepper. And then sometimes they will bite your head off. Let me taste this one. Oh wow, that's sweet. So I'm glad I left the seeds in because there's no heat in that at all. Next, I'm going to chop one bunch of cilantro. This is almost more like a creamy corn salsa. And if you don't like cilantro, go ahead and leave it out and add a little bit more green onion. Our green onions are going in. Some garlic powder, salt, pepper. I just added 1 cup of mayo and 1 cup of sour cream. If you don't like mayonnaise or you don't like sour cream, you could do all mayo or all sour cream, or you could substitute Greek yogurt for either of those if you want. But I really do like the flavor of both the mayo and the sour cream together. And so that's what I do. But sometimes I don't have mayo in my house. Sometimes I don't have sour cream. So I will mix it up between mayo, sour cream, and Greek yogurt. Because this on tacos, this on any sort of Tex-Mex is incredibly delicious. We like to have this with quesadillas, nachos, tacos, all sorts of deliciousness. And it makes a delicious dip as well. So this is going to now go into our serving dish. This does taste better if it chills as well. So we're gonna get it in here, and then we're gonna start on our final dip, which should actually be a little bit more labor intensive than the last couple we've done. It's one that is a classic, but I personally have never made it, and I think it is so delicious. So I wanna try making it for the first time. This dip barely fits into this container. I'm gonna get this in the fridge, and then I'm gonna set up for our next recipe. This next recipe is a very quick to come together recipe and quick from start to finish. We are gonna make 1 hour dinner rolls. The one caveat is the temperature of your house can affect how quickly this rises, so it may take a little bit longer than an hour if your house tends to be a little bit cold. But the beauty of this recipe is it has quite a bit of yeast in it, so it does rise relatively quickly. You can also make this recipe by hand if you want, or you can use a stand mixer. I'm gonna go ahead and use my mixer today just to make it go a little bit quicker. And we're gonna start with water and milk and active dry yeast. And because it has a whole tablespoon of yeast, that's what makes this come together pretty quick. The more yeast a recipe has, generally the quicker it's gonna rise and the quicker you're gonna be able to have your bread from start to finish. We're gonna let that sit together for just a minute or two until the yeast starts to get activated. 1, 2. Next, I'm gonna add our all-purpose flour. And I'm gonna start with 3.5 cups, and I might need to add another 1/2 cup. We'll just see what the dough looks like. I like to put my flour and then my butter. I don't like to put my oils or anything like that on top of my yeast. So we're gonna get our butter in there. And our last ingredient is our salt. Now we're gonna turn this on. It's looking pretty good. I'm gonna let this knead for a few minutes, see if it starts to come together and if I need to add any more flour. This has been kneading for a few minutes, and I think that looks pretty good when it comes to how much flour. It's still a little sticky, but it hasn't kneaded the whole amount of time. So I'm just gonna let this go, and we're not gonna add any more flour at this point. One of the things that took me a long time to learn when it comes to making bread products is you want to use as little flour as necessary, because if you're continuing to add more and more flour, that's when your bread tends to come out dry and dense. And so that's why I really try to add a little less than, or like if a recipe has a range, or if it doesn't have a range, I'll start with a little bit less or on the lower end of the range and then work my way up and let it knead for a little bit, let it rest, and see if we need to add more flour at that point. And that little trick alone has really helped me have yummier, less dense bread. So this is looking really nice. We've got a nice smooth ball of dough here. I'm gonna take this ball and transfer it into this bowl. I'm gonna spray this with a little bit of oil just so it doesn't dry out. Now, I'm making another batch of bread in this mixer. If I wasn't, I would just let it rise in the mixer, but I'm gonna let it rise in here. I'm gonna go ahead and cover it, and we're gonna let this rest until it doubles in size. Our rolls have doubled in size, so we can get these shaped into our baking dish. This roll recipe makes 12 rolls that are pretty decent size. You could make them twice as small and get 24 rolls if you want, if you kind of wanted like mini rolls. This dough is so nice. And then I like to roll it into a log just because then I think I can get more even cuts on it. I'm gonna cut it in half, in half, in half, and then in thirds. This recipe also makes a really good bun recipe, like hamburger bun recipe. And all I do to shape these is I turn in the roll onto itself. I don't like to have too much flour at this point because I like the dough to stick to itself. And then I pinch it at the end, the seam side in. Make sure I have a nice tensioned dough ball. And we need to prepare our baking dish. Turning in the dough onto itself to create a nice smooth surface or tension on top of the roll. And then I'm going to use the side of my pinky and my palm and the side of my thumb to push the dough and rotate it onto itself, creating a smooth ball where I can then pinch the ends together. So again, folding the dough onto itself. To create a smooth ball. And now we're going to pinch the ends together. Perfect roll. Now we're going to let these double in size. At this point, our dough balls have risen really nicely. I'm going to crack an egg, mix it up, and I'm going to put an egg wash on my rolls. You can skip this step if you want to. I like the golden color it gives. You could also top these rolls with some sesame seeds or poppy seeds or everything but the bagel if you wanted, and that would be delicious as well, but I'm going to keep them plain. I use this exact same recipe and I turn them into hamburger buns. What I do instead of putting them into these dough balls when they bake is I actually take the dough and I roll it into a ball and then I flatten it out pretty flat. And instead of baking it in a dish like this, I bake it on a cookie sheet and I have hamburger buns as opposed to these absolutely beautiful and delicious dinner rolls. The next recipe is going to be a no-knead bread recipe, and it is even easier than the last recipe we just made. It has almost all the exact same ingredients. We're just going to tweak the ratios a little bit and manipulate the dough just a little differently. So here I have 1.5 cups of water, and this calls for 3 cups of all-purpose flour. This is bread flour. You could use bread flour in this if you want. I generally make this with all-purpose flour, but if you have more bread flour on hand, you could certainly do that. I'm gonna add my flour right to my water. And this recipe does call for active yeast, but because this dough is going to sit for so long, it's okay if you don't pre-proof the yeast, along with 2 teaspoons of salt. This is a half teaspoon, that's why I'm doing 4 of those. And that is all the ingredients for this recipe. I'm gonna mix this together. This is also gonna be a sticky, shaggy dough. I just wet my hand just a little bit so that I can get in here and mix this dough up without it sticking to my hands. You don't have to knead this at all. I just want to make sure that the flour and water are incorporated well. And that's what it needs to look like. It doesn't have to look smooth or perfect or anything like that. What we're going to do is we're going to allow time to knead this dough for us. So I'm going to spray it with a little bit of avocado spray just so that the top doesn't dry out. And now I'm going to cover this. And I'm gonna set this on my counter over here, and I'm gonna let this sit until tomorrow, 12 to 18 hours. We will shape this and bake it. It is now the next day, and remember, all that we have in here is flour, water, yeast, and salt, and time is what got us to this point. So really, really easy. And now we're going to actually shape it. I'm going to put the silicone mat down just because I like to work with dough with a silicone mat down on my counter, but you don't need this. And I'm going to get some parchment paper out and flour it because it's going to be easier to manage this dough if I have a piece of parchment paper. So I'm going to well flour this because this is a very hydrated dough. Basically just means there's a lot of water to flour ratio, and so it's pretty sticky. And to shape it, all I'm going to do is do basically stretch and folds. I'm going to turn the dough onto itself, and what I'm trying to do is organize those gluten structures and create tension in the dough so that we have a nice smooth ball. And I'm just turning the dough onto itself until we have a beautiful smooth dough ball. I don't do any fancy shaping. I just keep turning it onto itself, basically like it's one big roll. This is kind of how I shape rolls, and try to pinch the bottom together so that all of those seams are pinched. You can see now we have some good tension on the top. I'm going to put this on this well floured surface, and then I'm going to put a little bit more flour on the top, and we're going to put this into our bowl. This is a bread that I usually serve as a side dish with dinner, but my sister uses this as a sandwich bread. She makes this recipe all the time, the one that lives in Oklahoma, and she will slice this up and make avocado toast. She will make sandwiches out of it. I never thought to do that till I went to Oklahoma to visit her, and I thought that was brilliant. It just depends on how thick you slice it, what you can do with it. So we're going to let this rise for a bit, and we're going to preheat the oven to 450 degrees. I'm also going to put a Dutch oven in the oven to preheat because we're going to bake this loaf in the Dutch oven. If you don't have an enamel Dutch oven, but you have a stainless steel one, you can use that as long as the lid is oven safe, and you can use that. And if you don't have either of those, I have baked this bread just straight in the oven and it works well. So with the oven's preheated, I'm going to score this loaf. It's time to bake our no-knead bread. So I have my Dutch oven preheated in here. I've got a couple ice cubes in this bowl because we're going to use those ice cubes to help steam the crust so that the dough has time to rise and there's moisture in the pot before the crust sets. That's what the water is supposed to do, or the ice. And the ice just makes it so it doesn't evaporate quite as quickly. So what I do is I put my dough ball in there, I throw my ice cubes underneath the parchment paper. Be careful, this is extremely, extremely hot. I always keep my pot holder on top of my lid so that I don't on accident grab it. We're gonna close this, we're gonna cook this covered for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take the lid off and you'll see what that looks like when the lid comes off to finish the bake. The timer just went off to take the lid off of this Dutch oven here. So you wanna be very careful not to touch the top of your oven, and that's looking beautiful. It's already got some nice color to it, but we're gonna take the lid off and we are going to let this we're gonna let this cook for another about 10 minutes. The best way to know if bread is done or not is to actually take its temperature. We want it about 200 degrees. I took that on the wrong side. And that is done. Perfect. I could have scored it a little bit more to get that knife cut a little bit more prominent, but it's gonna taste just as good. Perfect. So I'm gonna let this cool and we'll cut into it when we have all the rest of our bread done. And here is what it looks like sitting next to basically the same thing, but the other loaf that is sitting next to it is one that you can mix up the day of and bake. The no-knead overnight bread is delicious, but you have to remember to make it up the night before. So I'm gonna share with you in a bit how you can get the same loaf, but in one day. At this point, we are now going to make a quick crusty loaf. I say quick, it still takes about 4 to 5 hours, but you don't have to have it sit overnight, which is nice. So if you forget to make your dough the night before, you can still have a crusty loaf on your family's dinner table the day you want to make bread. So we're going to start with water, a little bit of honey, yeast, and flour. So we're doing a couple things different than the no-knead dough to make this happen a little bit quicker for us. With the no-knead dough recipe, we let time work to our advantage. But at this point, if we want to have a loaf of bread on our table and we forgot to start the bread the night before, we don't have the luxury of time. So what we're going to do is add a little bit more yeast. We're going to add a little honey to help activate that yeast. And we are going to do a couple stretch and folds. So this is still a no-knead bread recipe, but we are going to stretch and fold and kind of coax those gluten structures to form a little bit quicker than just letting the dough sit for an extended period of time. I was just showing you my salt. I use an unrefined salt. And so if you ever see like little specks in my dough, it's because those are the minerals that are in the salt that are not removed when the salt is being processed, because it's not really processed. They just dig it out of the ground and grind it to whatever size, put it in a jar, and send it to your home. I actually had the opportunity a couple of years ago to go to the salt mine, which was pretty cool. But here we've got our dough. Again, very simple ingredients: salt, water, a little bit of honey, yeast, and flour. Now I'm going to wet my hand. I've got it mixed up with the spoon, and I'm just going to wet my hand and do a couple stretch and folds to get this dough into a nice-ish ball. It still looks really, really shaggy. I'm going to cover this and I'm going to let it sit, and we're going to do 2 rounds of stretch and folds about every 30-ish minutes or so. I may have done 3. It doesn't have to be exact, but you kind of just want to gently coax that dough into a nice ball. So we're not kneading this dough. We are just doing some gentle stretch and folds to help strengthen the dough and get a nice dough ball to form. So once we do our stretch and folds with our wet hand, I'll cover it, let it sit. We'll do some stretch and folds, cover it, let it sit, and then we will bake it. So very, very simple. It's time to shape our quick, crusty loaf. So while this is being shaped and going to go through its final rise, I'm going to get this Dutch oven in the oven to preheat. To my well-floured surface, I'm going to go ahead and pull out my dough. This dough is absolutely beautiful. And I'm going to shape this a little bit different than I shaped the no-knead crusty loaf. The crusty loaf, I just turn it onto itself and keep turning it onto itself. This one, I'm going to kind of flatten it out just a tad, fold it onto itself like I would a letter. So 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And then I'm going to go from the short end, roll it up. And then I'm going to bring all the ends together just like I did with the no-knead loaf and try to create some good tension on the top of the loaf. More kind of like if you were to do a sourdough shape. I have done it this way. I've also done it the exact same way I do my crusty loaf, and they both turn out just fine. But this one I kind of wanted to show you a little bit different way to shape the loaf. Couple big air bubbles I'm going to pop real quick on the top. I'm going to cover this and we're going to let this do its second rise while the Dutch oven preheats. I think my knife needs to be replaced, my blade. Going into the oven. Again, I'm going to keep my pot holder on my lid so I don't touch that. I'm going to put my bread in here and I'm going to grab a couple ice cubes, throw that in the corner there, put the lid back on, close it up, cook it for 30 minutes, and then uncover it. At this point, it's been 30 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and uncover the pot, and then we'll let it finish cooking until it's really golden brown and the internal temperature has reached anywhere from about 205 degrees Fahrenheit to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. So it looks like we reached that temperature, which is perfect. So I'm going to pull this out and let it cool on a cooling rack completely before we cut into it. And here you can see just how beautiful and easy this quick-ish crusty loaf was to make. we get to go ahead and finally cut into these loaves. So I want to cut into the 2 rustic style loaves first, because I've made both of these many times, but I've never made them at the same time and done a taste test and looked on the inside of them side by side. They feel incredible. So this is our 4-hour crusty loaf. This is our overnight crusty loaf. And the way I like to cut these loaves is usually in half first. So there is our overnight loaf. And here is our 4-hour loaf. And then what I like to do is top them up on their side and cut them down this way. You can see how beautiful and soft this is. Just perfection. Are you ready to do some taste tests?
Yeah, these look great.
We have 2 of the kind of artisan style loaves, but this is an overnight loaf, and this is one that I made and baked today. So I want to do a taste test side by side because I have never tasted them side by side before, and see if we can tell if there's a more in-depth flavor with one of them, because they are fermented for a different amount of time. So let's start with the overnight one.
They both have great feel to them.
Texture?
Good
Yeah.
texture. Which one was that? Overnight is this one,
Overnight
right?
is
this
this
was
one.
same day?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want crust?
Trust?
Crust?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. It's a great chew. The crust is perfect because it's not like stick in your gums.
Yeah, not too hard, it's
Yeah.
soft still.
I'm gonna try just the
Crumb.
meat.
Yeah,
It's great.
awesome. So let's taste the one that I made the dough and baked it today.
That's pretty good.
I almost think I like it better.
It's like softer.
It has honey in it. Only a tablespoon.
I wouldn't say it's sweet.
No, it's not sweet, but honestly, I think I like this one better.
I think so too. They're very, very close though.
If,
Very, very
if
close.
you weren't tasting them side by side, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
It does look like the crust is a little bit thicker on the same day one, which is surprising.
I baked them the same temperature, same time. They basically have all the same ingredients, except for the same day one has a little more yeast because it needs to rise faster, and it has a little bit of honey, but only a tablespoon.
They're great. They're both
Very
really
good. I hope you enjoyed taking a look back at the best of recipes over the last year. This is now the 2nd year in a row where I've done this, and it's becoming one of my new favorite traditions to kind of take a look back, see what recipes have kind of become part of our rotation. And we also got reminded of the ones that maybe were kind of a one and done type thing, the ones that we didn't end up including in this huge mega compilation. So again, if you want any of these written recipes, check out the description box. The timestamps and written printable recipes or the reel where I found them will be linked down below. I want to thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me pop some more videos. I'll pop last year's compilation video here and another dinner inspiration video here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.